Chapter 530. That's not entirely true. Sun Huya shook her head. I've already told the hospital. I said that if we suspend you, wouldn't it mean that we have a guilty conscience? Of course, that's not appropriate. The hospital said that they would take another look. So you can still come to work tomorrow. Okay. I got it. Su Qingsang had a minor surgery to do tomorrow. The surgery had already been arranged. That patient had been treated by her before. Even if there was no surgery, she didn't want to rest. Qingsang, you've indeed been wronged in this matter, but don't worry. I believe that things will be resolved satisfactorily. Okay. I know. Su Qingsang hung up the phone. Thinking of Sun Huya's protection of her, she felt a little touched. Speaking of which, she hadn't been working in Rong City for long. But Sun Huya and the other colleagues in the department had all taken care of her. If possible, she didn't want to leave the first hospital. She started the car again and left the villa. The road ahead was a villa area that had been developed a long time ago, so there weren't many people at night. The Hua family's old house was a little further away from here. It was in another direction, and the city was in the opposite direction. Su Qingsang turned a corner in front of her. Just as she was about to drive onto the main road, a figure suddenly rushed out from the side road. It was called a small road, but it was actually an aisle between two villa areas. Su Qingsang was shocked and immediately stepped on the brakes. At this moment, the person also put his hands on the headlights in front of her car. She didn't drive fast, so she didn't touch the person. Before she could react, the figure had already quickly circled to the other side of the car and got into the car. Drive. Su Qingsang's eyes widened as she looked at the familiar facial features in the darkness. She subconsciously stepped on the accelerator. Through the rearview mirror, she could see a few more figures rushing out from the small road behind her. If Su Qingsang stopped the car and took a closer look, she would find that the leader was the mustached man from last time. However, Su Qingsang obviously wasn't in the mood to take a closer look. Her hands that were holding the steering wheel turned white. She also stepped on the accelerator very quickly. The people behind didn't expect that someone would come to their rescue. After running a few steps, they realized that they couldn't catch up. For a moment, their expressions were quite ugly. It's okay, they can't catch up. You can relax a little. You don't have to drive so fast. After making sure that the people behind her wouldn't follow her, Su Qingsang finally slowed down at the corner ahead. She finally turned around and looked at the person who got into her car. Zhang Yichen. Last time, he was hiding in the hot spring club. Now it was the same situation again, and she had encountered it twice. It seems that every time I meet you, your situation is very special. When Zhang Yichen put his hands on the headlights to avoid being hit by the car, he didn't see it clearly because of the reflection. After his eyes got used to the light, he saw that it was Su Qingsang. He could have escaped by another route, and his comrades were there too. However, he still got into her car as if he was possessed. Yes, that was right. I got lucky. I meet you every time. Zhang Yichen's words seemed to imply something. Su Qingsang couldn't bring herself to laugh. So according to what you're saying, I'm unlucky? You think it's bad luck that you met me? Su Qingsang nodded and said, That's right. Of course I'm unlucky to have met you. Last time, she could have left work and went to stitch up his comrade's wounds. Last time, she was enjoying the hot spring, but he suddenly came out. And because he had seen her in her swimsuit, Hua Jingyao had bullied her inside and out. If that wasn't bad luck, what was it? Zhang Yichen didn't say anything. He looked at the road ahead. 2 more crossings, and they would reach the main road back to the city. Since it's bad luck that you met me, you can drop me off in front. Su Qingsang blinked her eyes and turned to look at him. Uncle, are you angry? I'm just kidding. Even if she really felt that she was unlucky, she shouldn't have said it so directly. Zhang Yichen didn't say anything. He obviously didn't look happy. Su Qingsang felt very uncomfortable. The atmosphere made her feel a little awkward. Uncle, where are you going? Why don't I give you a ride? Since she was already in the car, Su Qingsang didn't mind being a good person to the end. Zhang Yichen thought about his original plan, to get the things and meet up with his comrades. But now he got in her car. It's so late. Why are you here alone? Are you here to see Uncle? No. Su Qingsang thought about the reason why she came here, but she didn't know how to explain it to Zhang Yichen. My mother bought me a house here. I left some things here, so I came to get them. Zhang Yichen didn't ask what they were. He looked at the time and said, So you haven't eaten yet? Yes. I was going to go home and eat with Hu Jiniao. Su Qingsang looked at Zhang Yichen and said politely, Uncle, have you eaten yet? No. Su Qingsang blinked her eyes. For the first time, she wondered if all soldiers were so honest and straightforward. Well, if you don't mind, why don't we go home and eat together? Hu Jiniao is home anyway. If Hu Jiniao wasn't home, she wouldn't have dared to bring him home. Even though she knew that he was Hu Jiniao's uncle, she only asked out of politeness. If it were someone else, he might have said no. Okay. Zhang Yichen answered without hesitation. Su Qingsang felt that this man really didn't know how to be polite. She just asked casually because he was a relative, but he took it seriously. Ms. Yu usually made 4 dishes and 1 soup. The portion wasn't very big. Hu Jiniao ate a lot. Should she make some noodles later? She had already begun to think that since she had invited the guest to her house, she should treat him well. She was driving now, so she didn't have time to call Hu Jiniao. Su Qingsang brought him home directly. While waiting for Su Qingsang at home, Hu Jiniao didn't stop. He kept making phone calls and arranging some things. He also investigated some things. He hoped that he wasn't overthinking things. He felt that this whole thing was very similar to what happened in Lin City. Why did it seem like it was premeditated and targeted at Su Qingsang? Of course, it was also possible that it wasn't premeditated. It was just that she met a very shameless couple who deliberately wanted to blackmail her. Either way, for Su Qingsang, who had just arrived in Rong City and entered the first hospital, it wasn't a good thing. After arranging everything, he felt that there shouldn't be anything left out. Hu Jiniao began to think again. If it was premeditated, then who would do such a thing? When he heard the door open, Hu Jiniao stood up from the sofa. Honey, you're back? Uncle? Hu Jiniao looked at Su Qingsang and then at Zhang Yichen. He couldn't connect the two of them together. He looked back and forth between the two of them, then finally returned his eyes to Su Qingsang. Honey. When Zhang Yichen saw Hu Jiniao, he took a step forward and said, Jiniao. Uncle? I just wanted to come and see you, but I ran into Qingsang, so we came up together. Zhang Yichen knew about Hu Jiniao. Not only did he know, but he had also been here before and even lived here. Now that he put it that way, it made sense. Zhang Yichen explained the situation before Su Qingsang opened her mouth. Su Qingsang glanced at him. She thought that he was probably on a secret mission and couldn't explain it clearly, so she didn't bother to correct him. She put down the car key and changed her shoes. Su Qingsang greeted Zhang Yichen like the hostess of the house. Jiniao, Uncle hasn't eaten yet. I'll go heat up the food. Sit with Uncle for a while. Okay. Hu Jiniao looked at Su Qingsang. He wanted to ask her about the hospital, but since Zhang Yichen was here, it wasn't appropriate. Su Qingsang went into the kitchen and quickly came out. She poured 2 glasses of juice. Uncle, have some juice first. The food will be ready soon. Thank you. Zhang Yichen sat down on the sofa and watched Su Qingsang go into the kitchen again. Hu Jiniao sat down next to him. Why did you come to see me? You've been in Rong City a lot these past few months, haven't you? I have something to do. Zhang Yichen's voice was calm. He didn't want to explain further. Hu Jiniao didn't need him to explain. Just pay attention to your own safety. Hu Jiniao thought of what Su Qingsang said last time. Qingsang said that she ran into you last time, and the situation was very dangerous. I know you don't listen to Grandaunt not to mention me, but you should be careful. After all, Grandaunt and the others care about you very much. I know. Zhang Yichen didn't expect Su Qingsang to tell Hu Jiniao about that. He was surprised for a moment, but also felt that it was reasonable. Su Qingsang and Hu Jiniao seemed to be quite close to each other. There shouldn't be any secrets between them, right? Su Qingsang only heated up the food. It didn't take much time. Jiniao, Uncle, it's time to eat. She was afraid that there wasn't enough rice, so she cooked some noodles. Do you want rice or noodles? Noodles. My wife cooked it. Of course I have to do it for her. There were outsiders here. Su Qingseng glanced at him. Before she asked Zhang Yichen what he wanted to eat, he said, "I'll eat noodles too." Su Qingseng didn't think much of it. Most northerners preferred noodles. Hua Jinyao watched Su Qingseng fill a bowl with noodles and put it in Zhang Yichen's hand. He said proudly, "You got lucky today. I can't bear to let Qingseng cook every day." Zhang Yichen glanced at Su Qingseng, then looked at Hua Jinyao. "Really? Then I'm in luck." "Of course." Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qingseng, his eyes full of smiles. There was a gentleness in his smile that he didn't even notice. Zhang Yichen saw it, but he didn't say anything. He picked up the bowl of noodles. It didn't taste very good, but it was a very homely taste. But he really felt that it was the most delicious thing in the world. It was the noodles cooked by Su Qingseng. She was Hua Jinyao's wife. If she was, he stopped thinking. Some thoughts couldn't even be thought about. Zhang Yichen looked down, and his mood suddenly became gloomy. Hua Jinyao didn't have time to care about Zhang Yichen. He knew that Su Qingseng had been wrong today, so he was more careful with her than usual. He took more care of her. "Here, have some soup. Nourish yourself. You must be tired these days, right? You've been flying around. Here, have a piece of fish to replenish your energy. And this. Ms. Yu's braised prawns are delicious today. Here, I'll help you peel them." As he spoke, he began to peel the prawns for her. Hua Jinyao. Su Qingseng couldn't help but look at Zhang Yichen. Her uncle was still here. What was he doing? "It's okay." Hua Jinyao put another piece of beef in her bowl. "Uncle, you're one of us." Zhang Yichen tightened his grip on the bowl and sounded a little uncomfortable. "You two are so loving." "Of course." Hua Jinyao blinked as he spoke. "Speaking of which, uncle, you should find one as well. Look at me. I'm so happy." Zhang Yichen looked at Hua Jinyao and Su Qingseng sitting together. He put some food in her bowl. She filled it for him. They were a handsome man and a beautiful woman. Hua Jinyao's face was full of love, while Su Qingseng's eyes were full of shyness. The two of them sat there like a perfect couple. Her eyes dimmed a little. "Not everyone can be as lucky as you." "That's true." Hua Jinyao nodded and put his big hand on Su Qingseng's shoulder. "I think I'm very lucky too. Right, wife?" Su Qingseng's anger at the hospital in the afternoon had almost dissipated. She glanced at Hua Jinyao and signaled him to stop. Hua Jinyao was a man who didn't know when to stop. He leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. "Hua Jinyao." His lips were covered in oil. Su Qingseng couldn't help but glare at him. "Sorry, I couldn't control myself." Hua Jinyao said that, but he didn't mean that he couldn't control himself at all. While eating, he didn't forget to tell Zhang Yichen about the benefits of having a partner. "Uncle, you're a few years older than me. You have to hurry up. You don't have to worry about me." Zhang Yichen suddenly didn't want to continue this topic. He interrupted Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao knew that he always had his own ideas. Normally, he would have said it, but today, he was in the mood. "Uncle, I really don't want to say this, but this is the benefit of being married. Only a married person would be able to tell. Not to mention other things. It's so comfortable to sleep with my wife in my arms on such a cold day." Hua Jinyao. He was getting more and more ridiculous. Su Qingseng glared at him. She looked a little embarrassed. Fortunately, Zhang Yichen didn't react. Otherwise, it would be very embarrassing. "Isn't there a heater?" Zhang Yichen had already eaten most of the noodles. Hua Jinyao didn't know what to say. "Forget it. I won't rush you. Let Great Aunt worry about your affairs. Maybe when my son is crawling on the floor, you'll still be single." Hua Jinyao. Su Qingseng glared at him again. Hua Jinyao smiled at her and said, "It's okay, wife. Uncle is one of us. He won't be angry. Right, uncle?" "Yes." Zhang Yichen nodded slightly and didn't say anything else. After dinner, he went back to the living room with Zhang Yichen. Su Qingseng went to clean up the dishes. Although the noodles were cooked, the two men had a big appetite, and the food was finished. Su Qingseng didn't expect Zhang Yichen to be so careless. There was still some food left, but he finished it. It was good that he didn't waste food. After cleaning up, she found that Zhang Yichen was still there. She couldn't help but look at Hua Jinyao. "Uncle said he was going to stay in a hotel. It's so late, so I suggested that he stay here for the night. There are empty rooms anyway." What do you think, wife? It's so late. We don't need to stay in a hotel. Su Qingsing nodded and said, I'll go get some toiletries. She went to get them while she was talking. There was a special storage room for these things. When she came out, Zhang Yichen was already in the guest room. Hua Jinyao offered to help him with the quilt, but he refused. He was from the army, so he was much faster than Hua Jinyao and the others when it came to housework. It was done in a few seconds. Su Qingsing watched as Zhang Yichen quickly put the quilt back on. Not only that, but he also folded a piece of tofu. Uncle is good, isn't he? Hua Jinyao gave a thumbs up and said, Mrs. Qin, do you think this tofu is flat? Yes, he is good. Su Qingsing didn't mean anything else when she said that. She was just echoing Hua Jinyao's words. I can do it too. I can fold it for you when I get back to my room. Hua Jinyao immediately realized that he was jealous. He put his arms around Su Qingsing's waist, looking like a child asking for candy. Su Qingsing didn't want to talk to him anymore. He was so childish and his uncle was here. He wasn't afraid of being laughed at. Wife, you don't believe me? Hua Jinyao didn't get the praise he expected, so he pulled Su Qingsing's arm. I believe you. I believe you, okay? Su Qingsing's tone was coaxing. Hua Jinyao couldn't stand her perfunctory attitude. Why don't you praise me then? For a moment, Su Qingsing felt that Zhang Yichen seemed to be holding back something. But he held back. Su Qingsing looked at Hua Jinyao. Look, he was about to laugh at him. Okay, let's go back to our room. No, you haven't praised me yet. Hua Jinyao hugged her and insisted on a compliment. Zhang Yichen's face darkened even more. Su Qingsing glared at Hua Jinyao. I know. You're good too. My husband is the best. Okay. Su Qingsing said it casually, but Hua Jinyao was satisfied. He didn't care that Zhang Yichen was next to him. He leaned over and kissed her. Honey, you're so good. He liked to show off his affection in public, but Su Qingsing didn't like it. Especially when Zhang Yichen was staring at her. She felt more and more uncomfortable. She gently pushed him away and handed the towel and toothbrush to Zhang Yichen. Thank you. Zhang Yichen took it and looked at her face, which had turned a little red because of Hua Jinyao's kiss. Calmly, he looked away. It's getting late. Uncle, go to bed early. I'm going back to my room with Qingsing. Okay. Zhang Yichen nodded and watched Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsing leave the room. He didn't go to bed right after they left. He closed the door and stood at the door, where Su Qingsing had been standing. Zhang Yichen clenched his fists, thinking of Hua Jinyao's love behavior. His eyes darkened, and all the romantic thoughts were thrown away by him. Chapter 531. Su Qingsing had been a little sad and aggrieved in the afternoon. However, after such a long time, all her emotions were gone. She was only tired now. She wanted to take a shower and sleep, so that she could go to work tomorrow. As soon as the door was closed, Hua Jinyao carried her in his arms. Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsing put her hands on his chest. I'm so tired today. I want to sleep. Honey. Hua Jinyao was a little annoyed by her insensitivity. He leaned over and gently bit her lips. I'm not thinking about that right now. Su Qingsing blinked. She really didn't believe Hua Jinyao. This guy was fine during the day. He looked like a human. At night, he was like a wolf. Her mind was full of that thing. Okay, I'm not thinking about that. Can you let me take a shower first? You can take a shower later. Hua Jinyao put his arms around her waist and carried her to the sofa near the balcony. There was no moon today. From this angle, they could see the bright lights in the distance. He put his arms around her waist and sat her on his lap. Honey, you've worked hard today. It's nothing. Su Qingsing thought he was talking about Zhang Yichen. That's your uncle. Besides, she wasn't that tired. I'm not talking about my uncle. Hua Jinyao turned her body around and made her look at him. Honey, don't you have anything to say to me? Su Qingsing was stunned. She met his eyes and found that his eyes were full of her. Her heart seemed to be gently scratched by something. That slight touch touched the softest part of her heart. Hua Jinyao. She just stared at him blankly, unable to react for a long time. Honey. Hua Jinyao kissed her on the lips. Don't you really have anything to say to me? Su Qingsing knew that he knew everything. However, she didn't want to trouble herself with this. She believed that she could handle it well. I just want to take a shower now. Is that okay? Don't you want to explain why you came back so late today? Su Qingsang knew that she couldn't lie to him about anything, and she didn't intend to. Something did happen, but I think I'll take care of it. Hua Jinyao's eyes were as dark as ink, and Su Qingsang's reflection could be seen in his eyes. Honey, I know you are very strong, and I also know that you can handle it well. But I hope you can rely on me more. Rely on me and let me handle it. What do you think? You'll handle it? How should we deal with it? Su Qingsang thought of Li Hong's words. Then you can tell me about it first. I'll listen to what's going on before I decide how to deal with it. Su Qingsang lowered her head. Thinking of Li Hong, she didn't know what to say. Hua Jinyao didn't rush her. He just quietly wrapped his arms around her waist. His chin rested against the top of her hair, and he caressed it gently. This was an extremely intimate posture that the two of them had formed. Su Qingsang slowly relaxed in his arms and breath. Actually, she had more or less adjusted her emotions. She had always been good at adjusting herself. However, being held by him like this, she suddenly felt wronged. It was like when a child fell down. If no one comforted him, the child wouldn't cry. If someone comforted him, he would cry even harder. Su Qingsang didn't change her posture. She just put her arms around Hua Jinyao's waist and whispered. She told him everything from the first time she met Li Hong to the day she performed the surgery for her. I really didn't expect that she would suddenly change her mind and pour such a big bucket of dirty water on me. If I had known, I wouldn't have gone to see her at noon. She went to see Li Hong alone. After listening to her story, Hua Jinyao believed that it was premeditated, which greatly reduced the conspiracy theory. From the looks of it, this should be an accident. Honey, you are too kind. Su Qingsang shook her head. She didn't think that she was kind. She was a doctor, and doctors should have the heart of a parent. She had thought that Li Hong was a poor girl, so she wanted to visit her. She didn't expect that things would turn out like this. Su Qingsang didn't expect that either. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. How? Su Qingsang looked at him. Find Li Hong, threaten her, and force her to tell the truth? That works. No, I'm afraid that it might backfire. What do you mean? Su Qingsang thought of how Li Hong went back on her words today, so she didn't think it was a good idea. I'm afraid that she'll change her mind again. If that happens, it won't just be my problem. You'll be in trouble too. That won't happen. Hua Jinyao was very confident. I'll let Yang Wenchang handle it. You have to believe in his ability. You have to trust him. I don't doubt you. Su Qingsang raised her head and looked into his eyes. Her eyes were clear and gentle. But Jinyao, I want to take care of it myself. You? How? There must be a way, right? Su Qingsang hadn't come up with a good idea yet, but that didn't stop her from being optimistic. In any case, the council hasn't given me any punishment for the time being. I also feel that things haven't reached the worst stage yet. Hua Jinyao couldn't agree with her. Doctors and teachers were the two professions that suffered the most misunderstandings. If this kind of misunderstanding happened to someone else, he might not care. However, if this kind of misunderstanding happened to Su Qingsang, he felt that he couldn't tolerate it. He didn't want Su Qingsang to be misunderstood like that, not even by thinking about it. Jinyao. Su Qingsang gently put her arms around his waist. Thank you, but I really don't mind. She might have been angry at first, but after she calmed down, she didn't think it was a big deal. It wasn't the first time she had been misunderstood, and it wasn't the first time something like that had happened to her. She didn't need to care about what those keyboard warriors thought or believed. She just needed to have a clear conscience. She just needed the people she cared about, the people who loved her, to believe her. As for the others, she really didn't need to care about them. Hua Jinyao's phone rang. It was Yang Wenchang. He told Hua Jinyao that he and the people from the public relations department had worked hard for the past few hours, and finally removed the trending topic. The related Weibo posts had been deleted as well. The reason for deleting it was simple. False content had to be deleted. See, it's solved, right? Hua Jinyao showed her the Weibo page. All the news related to Su Qingsang, the so-called quack doctor, was gone. Su Qingsang didn't expect Hua Jinyao to act so quickly. He must have known about it a long time ago. The tip of her nose was red, a little sore, and a little hot. Jinyao, did I tell you to believe me? Of course, it wasn't completely solved. Most importantly, Li Hong was the root of the problem. As long as she didn't cause any more trouble, there wouldn't be any more serious problems. Su Qingseng didn't say anything. In fact, she had always believed him. All right. Seeing that she was so touched that she was about to cry, Hu Jinyao couldn't help but laugh. He reached out and pinched her cheek. Didn't I tell you? Leave everything to me? See, it's simple, right? It was indeed simple. Su Qingseng nodded, and a smile suddenly appeared on her face. Actually, these Weibo posts and trending topics, I don't mind. All I want is for you to believe me. As long as he was willing to believe her and stand behind her, she would be satisfied. Silly wife. Hu Jinyao kissed her on the lips. Of course I believe you. You're my wife. Su Qingseng smiled and rubbed her face against Hu Jinyao's chest. Hu Jinyao. Thank you. With him by her side, even if he couldn't do anything for her, she felt at ease. All those hardships and grievances seemed to have become insignificant at this moment. They were all small things. She was able to adjust her mood. Go take a shower. Hu Jinyao patted her back and said, sleep early. Okay. When she got up in the morning, Su Qingseng forgot that Zhang Yichen was in the house. She put on some clothes and went to the kitchen in her pajamas. The moment she walked out of the room, she saw Zhang Yichen walking in from outside. She blinked her eyes and lowered her head to look at her disheveled appearance. She quickly turned around and went back to her room. The whole process lasted only a few seconds, but the awkward and uncomfortable look in her eyes, and the way she dodged like a deer, made Zhang Yichen's heart skip a beat. He looked down and went back to his room as if nothing had happened. When Su Qingseng came out again, only Hu Jinyao was outside. Before she came out, she had checked her clothes again and again to make sure that they were fine. Jinyao. Good morning, wife. I bought breakfast. Let's eat. Okay. Su Qingseng nodded. She looked at the living room and the guest room. Where's uncle? He said he had a mission. He left. Su Qingseng didn't say anything. It was better for him to leave. Although there were many beautiful women on the beach in bikinis, Su Qingseng still felt a little uncomfortable when she thought that an elder had seen her embarrassing appearance. Let's eat. I'll take you to work after that. No thanks. I'll go by myself. Since the Weibo post had been removed and there was no new news, Li Hong was the only one left. The hospital had experience in dealing with medical disputes. They believed that the hospital would find a way to deal with a patient like Li Hong. I'll take you to work. Hu Jinyao was still worried about her. He didn't want something like that to happen again. The Weibo post could be deleted, and the trending topic could be removed. However, some reporters could get into every nook and cranny. Yesterday, Yang Wenchang had already given them a heads up in case two blind people showed up. He had to prevent that from happening. Su Qingseng thought for a while and didn't turn him down. She thought that the problem was mostly solved, and the rest was in Li Hong's hands. Both Li Hong and Lin Gang tried to blackmail the hospital when they were pregnant. Maybe it was because of money. As long as the compensation was within their expectations, they wouldn't make a scene. No, they couldn't pay the money. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the right anymore. But if they didn't pay, how could they make Li Hong change her words? How could they settle the matter this time? Don't think too much. While her mind was wandering, the car had already stopped at the gate of the hospital. Fortunately, there were no people at the gate. Su Qingseng patted her chest, feeling that she was too nervous. Hu Jinyao took her hand and squeezed it gently. All right. I said don't be nervous. Call me if anything happens. Okay. Su Qingseng looked around the hospital and thought of the deleted Weibo post. I think the hospital will find a way, right? You don't have to worry about the rest. Of course I have to. You're my wife. Hu Jinyao kissed her on the cheek. The morning light shone into the car and dyed Hu Jinyao's face gold. He smiled and kissed her. His eyes were filled with tenderness. For a moment, Su Qingseng felt that those things weren't important anymore. There was only Hu Jinyao in front of her now. This is what she likes and also her man. Okay. I'll call you if anything happens. But it should be fine now. Go ahead. Under Hua Jinyao's gaze, Su Qingsang entered the hospital gate and went to her department. She walked over and felt the same as usual. There was no difference. It was as if the impulse and the argument yesterday were all an illusion. But the more it was like that, the more flustered Su Qingsang felt. Qingsang, you're here. Zhang Qinyu greeted her when he saw her. Zhang Qinyu had been on leave yesterday and didn't know what happened in the hospital. When he came today, the matter had been settled. Seeing that he seemed to be fine, Su Qingsang was more or less relieved. Morning. Dr. Zhang, have you eaten? No. Are you going to treat me to dinner? Sure. Su Qingsang knew that he had been on leave yesterday. But I do have something for you. I know. There's a gift. Zhang Qinyu smiled brightly. Someone posted it on WeChat yesterday. Ah, someone posted it on WeChat? Yes. So I've been waiting. Zhang Qinyu's teasing made Su Qingsang feel a little more relaxed. She gave Zhang Qinyu the local specialties that she hadn't given out yesterday. Zhang Qinyu took it, waved it in his hand and smiled at her. Thank you. I'll treat you to dinner next time. As for me, I'm going to have breakfast. Do you need me to bring you lunch? No thanks. I've eaten. Seeing that he was about to leave, Su Qingsang stopped him. Dr. Zhang. Yes. Did anything special happen when you were in the hospital this morning? Anything special? Nothing. It's fine. Su Qingsang shook her head, thinking that the matter might have been solved. Li Hong changed her mind yesterday. Her husband might have encouraged her to do that. Maybe she found her conscience again today. Su Qingsang had to see patients in the morning. She was busy, so she had to put this matter aside. She didn't look at Li Hong. At this moment, she felt that the more she looked at Li Hong, the more Li Hong would react. If Li Hong said more things out of thin air, it wouldn't be good for her and the hospital's image. However, she also asked Sun Huiya about Li Hong's situation. Sun Huiya said that after the drama yesterday, Li Hong felt much better. After they left, she fell asleep again after eating and sleeping well. She had checked her wound during the ward rounds this morning. Su Qingsang handled it well. There was no big problem. Li Hong didn't ask Su Qingsang about it. She seemed to have forgotten what had happened yesterday. Lin Gang, on the other hand, didn't look happy. He asked Sun Huiya a few questions. He said that the hospital wanted to let it go just like that. He said that the hospital was going to cover up for the doctor who insulted the patient. He said that the hospital bullied people like that. Sun Huiya didn't know what to say. Strangely, Lin Gang stopped asking questions after Li Hong glared at him. She seemed to be willing to let it go. Sun Huiya told him what she thought. She couldn't guarantee that was the case, but at least for now, it was very likely. No matter what, as long as they don't make a scene and don't pressure the hospital, we won't be in a difficult position. We won't be in such a difficult position. I know. Su Qingsang nodded. As long as Li Hong didn't go back on her word and didn't change her mind, it would be the best result. Sun Huiya patted Su Qingsang's shoulder before she left. Qingsang, no matter what, things are under control now. You can relax and do your job well. Su Qingsang nodded. Thank you, Director Sunday. Since the hospital had made their attitude clear, Su Qingsang didn't want to ask any more questions. She had an operation to perform in the afternoon. It was a minor operation, but she still needed time to prepare. She immersed herself in the operation. As a result, he did not notice the changes that had taken place in the outside world in such a short period of time. The afternoon passed just like that. When Su Qingsang came out of the operating room, it was almost time to get off work. She told the patient what to pay attention to and went back to her office. There were still 15 minutes before she got off work. Su Qingsang planned to change her clothes and check Weibo again. However, it didn't open. She was stunned and tried again but still couldn't open it. Su Qingsang had a bad feeling about this. Somehow, she didn't want to give up. She kept trying and refreshing again and again. Finally, she could open Weibo. Someone knocked on her office door. The person who came in was Li Meilin. She looked anxious and nervous at the moment. Meeting Su Qingsang's eyes, she had to calm down a few times to calm her breathing. Dr. Su, something bad happened. Su Qingsang's heart skipped a beat. She squeezed her phone and looked at Li Meilin. What's wrong? Look at Weibo. Lee Malin saw the phone in Su Chingsang's hand and said in a low voice, "Look. You'll know when you see it." Chapter 532. Su Chingsang didn't notice Lee Malin's gaze. She could clearly hear her own heartbeat. She looked down at the Weibo page she had just opened and clicked on the local trending topic. Different from the content that had already been deleted in the morning, this time, almost all the local trending topics were about her. Or it was news related to her. For example, Hua Jinyao and Tianyu Group. These keywords didn't appear on Weibo, but the article was very suggestive. Why does a doctor who insults a patient still work in a hospital? When medical ethics become empty talk, how can we trust you, doctor? The background of the doctor who insulted a patient. She is the wife of the CEO of a large corporation. The related Weibo posts of the doctor who insulted a patient were all deleted overnight. What's the reason? Hashtag the doctor who insulted a patient hashtag this topic was pushed to the top of the local trending topics. Not only that, but all the topics related to this topic were pushed to the top. For example, hashtag the doctor who insulted a pregnant woman caused her incision to split. Hashtag the doctor who insulted a pregnant woman to save a patient. Shouldn't he save everyone? Hashtag the loss of medical ethics. The doctor-patient relationship becomes more tense. Hashtag the doctor insulted a pregnant woman and caused her depression. Almost all of these trending topics had the same topic. There was also a Weibo post that explained the ins and outs of the matter quite clearly. For example, Su Chingsang treated the pregnant woman, who tried to blackmail the hospital. And then there were photos of the pregnant woman. Then there were photos and videos of Su Chingsang in the hospital that day. There were photos and videos of Li Hong in the hospital. That day, Li Hong complained in the ward with a pale face. Finally, the camera turned and showed Su Chingsang's side profile. The video had hundreds of thousands of views and reposts. This popularity was similar to that of a celebrity who cheated on her and fell down on the red carpet. Su Chingsang looked at the top 10 local trending topics. 8 of them were related to hashtag the doctor who insulted a patient. These topics were all directed at her. She wasn't the only one who was scolded badly by those who were related to her. Even the entire obstetrics and gynecology department and the entire first hospital were scolded. However, she was the one who was scolded the most. Among them, there was even a Weibo post like hashtag I strongly demand that this scum of the medical world be exposed. The people who posted on Weibo kept asking people to push this post to the top in the comments section. The number of reposts had already exceeded 50,000. Scrolling through the comments, it was all scolding. Go to hell. Scum. Scum. A quack. If he encountered a few rational people who would speak up for him, that person would be besieged by a group of people and scolded even more miserably. The entire Weibo was like a battlefield without any smoke. These news and trending topics were the best at catching people's attention. Following these trending searches and headlines on Weibo, there were even more insults than the last time. Even though Su Chingsang was prepared, she was surprised to see all kinds of curses from the keyboard warriors. Some of them even said that they wanted to find her house. Someone else was coming to the hospital to look for her. There were even people who said that they would stop her midway and pour acid on her. It was many times more exaggerated than when he was in Lin City. Dr. Su. She was still watching, but Lee Malin couldn't bear it. Do you want to leave? Hide. Where could she hide to? There are a lot of people outside. There are reporters and the onlookers, the patients, and the patients' family members were all crowded outside, watching the reporters. Su Chingsang felt her forehead twitch. Looking at the stirring words and pictures on her phone, she smiled at Lee Malin. Malin, thank you. Dr. Su. Lee Malin looked around and finally said helplessly, why don't you leave from the back door? Su Chingsang didn't know what to do now, but she knew that she didn't want to run away, at least not like this. The phone rang. It was Su Yusin. Sister, what's going on over there? Su Yusin didn't use Weibo much in the past. However, since Su Chingsang went to Rong City, the two of them followed each other's Weibo accounts in addition to their WeChat moments. He was bored today, so he found it in one go. The screen was full of news related to Su Chingsang. When he first saw Su Qingsang's photo, he was surprised. When he looked at the content of the Weibo seriously, Su Yusin almost exploded with anger. Sister, why didn't you tell the family about such a big thing? What kind of people were they? Did they really think that there was no one in the Su family? Even if Su Qingsang married to Rong City, she was still a member of the Su family and the Li family. It's nothing. Su Qingsang could still smile at this moment. It's really nothing. Yusin, you go do your own things. I know what I'm doing. What do you mean by that? Others are already bullying us. Su Yusin couldn't take it anymore. Wait for me. I'll book a ticket now and come over in the afternoon. Yusin, how could Su Qingsang let him come over? Don't make trouble for me. I don't need you to do this. There's still your brother-in-law. Yes. Where's brother-in-law? Su Yusin's voice was filled with dissatisfaction. Such a big thing has happened. I don't believe he doesn't know, right? He knows. He also asked someone to delete his Weibo post yesterday. However, he didn't expect that the more he deleted it, the worse it got. Those people, seeing that the previous Weibo post was deleted, became even more lively. Everyone seemed to be on steroids. Many of those Weibo posts were related to Tianyu Group. Some Weibo posts dug out her identity. The only thing missing was the name of her husband. But this morning, she and Hua Jinyao had been photographed in the car. A small part of Hua Jinyao's face was blocked by her. But if someone paid attention, they would still be able to recognize him. Under the Weibo posts that scolded her, some said that they were rich and heartless, and that they used their power to bully others. Even the things that had happened to her in Lin City were exposed. Zhang Mei, who jumped off a building, Lu Xiangyu, who was abused, and Li Rongrong's matter. She could go through her previous Weibo posts and know that she was wronged and innocent. But now, from these people's mouths, those things were all related to her. Why could she still be a doctor? It was because of the power of a certain group. Which group was this? There was no need to point it out. Everyone could guess. This also made the scolding worse. Many people in Rong City said that she had harmed too many people in Lin City. So she came to Rong City to practice medicine. More people said that they wanted Su Qingsang to go back to Lin City. Since her medical skills and ethics were not good, she shouldn't come out and make a fool of herself. With so many messages, any one of them was enough to make Su Yusin explode with anger. Sister, he deleted it. What am I looking at now? Well, even if you don't let me come to Rong City, I will let our mother come. Su Yusin. Su Qingsang felt a headache coming on. Can you stop making trouble for me? Trust me, your brother-in-law, and I will take care of this matter. But Mom doesn't use Weibo. She is busy with company affairs. Plus, what happened to Dad made her so unhappy. Do you want Mom to worry about you? Su Yusin didn't say anything, but it felt so bad for his family to be bullied like this. Sister, can you not stay in Rong City? You go home. You go back to Lin City. Anyway, you are familiar with Lin City. If it doesn't work, I will buy a hospital. Okay, stop it. Su Qingsang interrupted. Your brother-in-law called me. I'm going to hang up. Anyway, don't get involved in this matter, and don't tell Mom. Su Yusin didn't want to, but he could only leave it at that. After all, Rong City was Hua Jinyao's territory. He believed that he could handle it well. Su Qingsang hung up. This time, the person who called to care about her was Shi Mingwan. She also liked to use Weibo. As a result, she found out that Su Qingsang caused trouble again. Just like how she persuaded Su Yusin, she stopped Shi Mingwan from coming to Rong City. Su Qingsang hung up and thought about her bad luck this time. Dr. Su. Li Meilin was anxious. She didn't expect Su Qingsang to be in the mood to call here. Hurry up and leave. You won't be able to leave later. I'm afraid that those reporters will come to the obstetrics and gynecology department later. Now there were security guards and doctors blocking them, but she was afraid that if there were too many people, they wouldn't be able to block them later. Meilin. Thank you. Su Qingsang thought for a moment. Since the main target of those people was her, it was also a way to avoid them for now. However, before she could avoid them, the leader of the hospital office called. It was Zhou Xiaonan who called in person. Dr. Su, where are you now? Come to the hospital office right now. Okay. Su Qingsang hung up the phone, already prepared in her heart. Dr. Su. She also heard Su Qingsang on the phone, and the worry in her eyes increased. Thank you. I'm fine. Su Qingsang patted Li Meilin on the shoulder. No matter what, she was very touched that Li Meilin cared about her so much. Out of the office, the hospital office was on the other side. Su Qingsang went there. Halfway there, she received a call from Hu Jinyao. Qingsang, where are you? I'm in the hospital. What's wrong? Stay there and don't move. I'll come to you. No need. I'm going to the hospital office now. Director Zhou wants to see me. Okay, wait for me there. I'll come right away. It's okay. I'll leave later. Su Qingsang had already walked to the door of the hospital office conference room as she spoke. Okay, I'll talk to you later. I'm hanging up. Su Qingsang hung up the phone, looked at the white door, and took a deep breath. Finally, she pushed the door and entered. There were 2 more leaders in the hospital office than yesterday. Su Qingsang had seen them once before, but she couldn't remember their names. Hello, Director Zhou. Su Qingsang looked at the leaders. It was different from when she was in Lin City. Zhou Hongqian was there, and she was only allowed to go home to rest and wait for the results of the investigation. But looking at the current situation, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to get through the investigation as easily as she did in Lin City. Dr. Su. Zhou Xiaonan was also in a difficult position. No matter how he asked Li Hong yesterday, she wouldn't let him go. She and her husband had a death grudge. Su Qingsang insulted her and caused her wound to open up. The other party was too stubborn, so stubborn that Zhou Xiaonan and the other 2 directors could not find a way to deal with such a tough nut to crack. The hospital knew about Su Qingsang's background. After all, on Su Qingsang's first day at work, Hu Jinyao swaggered into the hospital to support her. Zhao Hongyu, the director of the first hospital, was a friend of old Master Hua. They had met at private dinners. Su Qingsang was the wife of the president of Tianyu Group. If it wasn't necessary, the hospital didn't want to offend her. But the situation in front of them was obviously beyond their expectations. The hospital also had a headache. If they forced Su Qingsang to be suspended, they were afraid that they would offend Tianyu Group. But if they didn't suspend her, the matter was so big, and there were so many reporters and patients' families outside. Look at how big the matter is now. How do you think we should solve it? Su Qingsang stood there without moving. She knew the hospital's concerns. She was no longer the novice doctor who had just graduated. Dr. Su, we all know that you were wronged. But now things have turned out like this, you see. Zhou Xiaonan also felt that he was in a difficult position. How could something like this happen to him? Let him deal with it. He didn't want to offend Tianyu Group. I understand. Su Qingsang didn't wait for him to finish. Director Zhou, Director Chen, Director Huang, I was wronged. I believe in myself. But I also understand that the hospital needs to explain to the public. I also know that you need to give an explanation to the media and the public. So I am willing to accept the suspension. I will come back to work after this matter is completely investigated. Look at you. You are so sensible. Zhou Xiaonan looked embarrassed. In fact, if they could, they really didn't want to carry out this decision. Su Qingsang didn't need them to say anything. She could already understand what they meant. She bowed to Zhou Xiaonan. Thank you, Director Zhou. Don't worry, I won't make things difficult for the hospital. Dr. Su, don't blame us. We have no choice. Zhou Xiaonan's official tone was smooth. Don't worry, we will definitely believe in your innocence. Now we only need to investigate the matter clearly. When the time comes, we will definitely prove your innocence. Okay. I will also wait for the day when I can prove my innocence. After Su Qingsang finished speaking, she left the hospital office. As soon as she left the door, the calmness on her face immediately disappeared. She had been prepared for the possibility of suspension, but when the punishment really came, she still felt very uncomfortable. She really just wanted to be a good doctor. Why was it so difficult? Su Qingsang walked towards the obstetrics and gynecology department's office. The suspension made her a little distracted. For a moment, she forgot what Li Meilin had just said. Before she could get to her office, she was blocked in the hallway by someone. Needless to say, the person was Li Hong's husband Lin Gang. He was surrounded by many people who seemed to be from various media outlets. Some of them were holding microphones, some were holding recording pens, and some were holding cameras. It's her. Seeing Su Qingsang, Lin Gang's eyes almost popped out. He pointed at Su Qingsang, his face full of accusation. Reporter friend, it's her. She pushed my wife down and caused her wound to split open. It's her, it's all her fault. Before Su Qingsang could react, she was surrounded by the reporters. In fact, only half of them were reporters, and the other half were people called by Lin Gang. Su Qingsang was surrounded by so many people, and the first one was a reporter from the local news channel. Excuse me, are you Dr. Su Qingsang? Do you have any explanation for insulting the patient and causing the patient's wound to open up? Explanation? Explain what? Su Qingsang didn't answer the reporter's question. She wanted to step back, but there were also people standing behind her. Dr. Su, as a doctor, you've said so many inappropriate things and done so many inappropriate things. Don't you think you should apologize to the patient's family? Su Qingsang couldn't step back. She looked at Lin Gang calmly and said, I didn't do anything wrong. Why should I apologize? Look, Lin Gang was suddenly excited. He stood in the crowd and pointed at Su Qingsang. So arrogant? Have you ever seen such an arrogant doctor? I haven't seen it before. Such an arrogant doctor. Who is arrogant? Su Qingsang stared at Lin Gang's face. Who is arrogant? Mr. Lin, why don't you tell me what you've done? Doctor, you're threatening people. I'm so scared. Lin Gang shrunk his body, as if he was scared by Su Qingsang's words. Su Qingsang wanted to roll her eyes. Did she just say she was arrogant? How did it become a threat? Dr. Su Qingsang, are you threatening the patient's family? Do you know you'll lose your license? Am I threatening them? Su Qingsang looked at the reporter who spoke. He was from a tabloid and didn't seem to be famous. You're a reporter when you haven't learned Chinese well? Why are you insulting people? The reporter was angry. Su Qingsang cleared her throat and said, You have a problem with your understanding. How did I insult you? My friends, do you see it now? Do you see it? Such an arrogant doctor. Not only did she threaten the patient, but she also insulted the reporter. Yes. Why is she so arrogant? Because she has a backer. That's right. But does having a backer mean she can do whatever she wants? We don't admit it. Apologize. We want you to apologize. The people in the crowd spoke one after another, as if they were the ones who were being threatened and insulted. Su Qingsang's forehead twitched. She didn't want to stay here any longer. Excuse me, please. Look, she's trying to leave just like that. Lin Gang and the people behind him stood in front of Su Qingsang on one side, while the reporters and the others stood on the other side. Su Qingsang was surrounded by a group of people and couldn't escape at all. She furrowed her brows. Excuse me, please. This is a hospital. We know this is a hospital. Lin Gang pointed at her and said, I'm afraid you don't know. Huh. You're a doctor, but you're treating people indiscriminately. People almost died because of you, and you still want to insult people. If you don't give us an explanation today, don't even think about leaving. Yes, that's right. Don't even think about leaving. The people behind him shouted. The corridor of the hospital was completely blocked. The leading reporter looked at Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang, let's not talk about the compensation. Shouldn't you apologize for what you said and did? Yes. Apologize. Yes. Apologize. Make her apologize. 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 Not only the reporters, but the patients' families behind them also shouted. Dozens of people shouted at the same time, asking Su Qingsang to apologize. Su Qingsang stood still. She would never apologize. If she apologized, then what she didn't do would become her fault. How could she allow things to become like that? However, the situation was too chaotic, and it was not good for her. She didn't know if the security guards and other people in the hospital were blocked by someone. No one came up at the moment. Su Qingsang took a deep breath and tried to calm herself down. She didn't look at the reporters, the families of the patients, or the onlookers. Instead of retreating, she took a step forward and stood in front of Lin Gang. You said that I insulted your wife and caused her wound to open up? Yes. Lin Gang was quite confident. What? You don't want to admit it? Let me tell you, I don't only want you to apologize in person. I also want you to compensate for my wife's loss. Su Qingsing wasn't stupid. She understood what he was saying. To put it bluntly, Lin Gang just wanted money. Oh, then how much money do you think is appropriate? Su Qingsing didn't miss the flash of joy in Lin Gang's eyes. She was waiting for him to make another move. Suddenly, someone pulled Lin Gang's arm hard from behind. Lin Gang seemed to wake up at once. Who wants your money? I don't want your money. I just said that I want you to compensate for my wife's loss. After all, the person who is being hurt because of your actions is my wife. As for us, we have the right to ask you to apologize, don't we? Don't we? He didn't fall into the trap? Su Qingsing glanced at him, and then at the person who had pulled Lin Gang's arm. Lin Gang might have done it for money, but what about the others? Why should I apologize for what I didn't do? Su Qingsing knew that this couldn't be settled peacefully, but she didn't want to admit defeat. Mr. Lin, I'll say it again. I won't apologize. I didn't do anything wrong. Lin Gang didn't expect Su Qingsing to be so stubborn even in this situation. He thought of Li Hong's uterus being removed by Su Qingsing, and he got angry. He suddenly raised his finger and pointed at Su Qingsing. This quack won't admit her mistake. What should we do? Apologize. 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 Yes, you're right. Apologize. Su Qingsing watched as those people squeezed in front of her. She suddenly realized that she had been too naive and careless this time. She stepped back, but the reporters behind her blocked her way. In front of her was the fierce Lin Gang and the medical troublemakers he had brought with him. The people in the corridor began to shout. No one knew who started it. Su Qingsing saw a fist coming toward her. She was shocked. She wanted to dodge, but it was too late. The fist was getting closer and closer to her face. Su Qingsing knew she couldn't dodge it, so she closed her eyes and prepared for the pain. Chapter 533. Su Qingsing closed her eyes, so that she could hear the noises around her more clearly. Footsteps, noises, and the slight sound of the wind. She could even feel the wind brought by the other party's fist as it swung towards her. Stop! With a cold rebuke, someone tugged at her body. The next second, she fell into a warm and firm embrace. Su Qingsing opened her eyes and looked up along the hand on her waist. Jinyao. She had just told him on the phone that he didn't have to come. But God knew how much she wanted him to come when she thought she was going to be beaten. Jinyao. Su Qingsing held his arm tightly. She had accepted the result calmly a moment ago. But when she saw Hua Jinyao, she suddenly felt like crying. Hua Jinyao. She had a lot to say, but she couldn't say a word. All she could do was call his name. I'm here. I'm here. Hua Jinyao held Su Qingsing and held her tightly in his arms. Honey, I'm sorry. I'm late. He had long since blocked the fist that was thrown at him. Although there were many people around, Hua Jinyao successfully protected Su Qingsing in his arms with his height advantage. He took her to a corner near the wall. He used his own body and arms to form an excellent shelter, to help her block out all the wind and rain outside. Su Qingsing clutched the front of Hua Jinyao's shirt tightly and buried her face in his chest, trying to ease her agitated emotions. Hua Jinyao let her hold him and glanced at the people in the corridor. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Lin Gang. He knew that it was Lin Gang who had attacked her, but now he was not in a hurry. Some things should be settled slowly. Su Qingsing breathed in Hua Jinyao's familiar scent and slowly relaxed. After she relaxed, she found that it was too quiet around her. She couldn't help but turn around to see what was going on. The chaos in the hallway had completely quietened down. Not only the man who had planned to attack Su Qingsing, even the reporters and the people that Lin Gang brought with him were now under control. The people who restrained them were all wearing green military uniforms. Su Qingsing's eyes almost popped out of their sockets when she saw who it was. Zhang Yichen? Why is he here? Unlike before, this time, Zhang Yichen wasn't wearing his regular army uniform. Instead, he was wearing a very formal military uniform. The two thin golden bars and four-star emblems on his shoulders almost blinded Su Qingsang. She had heard about this uncle from Hu Jinyao. However, she didn't expect him to be a senior colonel at such a young age. Now the people he brought were divided into two groups, easily separating those people from before. Standing in the middle of the corridor, Zhang Yichen glanced coldly at the people who had been causing trouble just now. We are on a mission. No photos. Carry out a mission? What mission? No one dared to ask in detail. Those who wanted to take pictures put down their phones. Su Qingsang stared at the man with her eyes wide open. She couldn't believe that things had been resolved so easily. Lin Gang was still standing there. He wanted to say something, but when he met Zhang Yichen's eyes, he shrunk his neck and didn't dare to speak. Our senior colonel is in this hospital. Please keep quiet. Now all unrelated people, please leave the hospital. Thank you for your cooperation. It was polite but also rude. The reporters and the troublemakers looked at each other speechless. In the end, they all left with their heads lowered. Lin Gang didn't want to leave. He still wanted to cause trouble. However, he knew that he couldn't take advantage of Su Qingsang now. He glared at Su Qingsang. The look in his eyes showed that he wouldn't give up easily. Su Qingsang subconsciously leaned against Hu Jinyao. She never thought that she would provoke such a troublesome person. It's okay. Hu Jinyao put an arm around her shoulder and whispered in her ear. Leave it to me. I'll help you. Su Qingsang raised her head to look at him. She couldn't hide the worry in her eyes. Hu Jinyao. She didn't want to drag him into this. She had already gotten him into trouble. Don't worry, honey. Hu Jinyao kissed her forehead. Trust me. I have a solution. Su Qingsang pressed her lips into a straight line. Shameless people like Li Hong and Lin Gang could go back on their word, even if they made a promise. What could Hu Jinyao do? Honey, you need to learn to trust me more. Hu Jinyao leaned against her ear and said in a very low voice. Su Qingsang looked at him and finally nodded. The crowd in the corridor had already left. What they were doing was quite eye-catching. Zhang Yichen had just asked someone to drive the crowd away. He turned around and saw Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao hugging each other. They acted as if no one else was around. Zhang Yichen frowned slightly, but only for a second. He took a step forward and walked toward them. Zhang Yichen met up with his subordinates this morning and received an order for a military exercise. The local troops in Rong City were having a military exercise, and he was sent to guide them. He also took his subordinates there to learn from each other. This kind of exercise couldn't be easier for him. At the end of the maneuver, he planned to return to his unit with his most elite team. He didn't know if it was a coincidence or fate. When he passed by the hospital, he saw many troublemakers outside. He wasn't a nosy person, but he was worried about Su Qingsang. Before he came in, he saw Hu Jinyao's car and hurriedly got out of it. When he saw that Su Qingsang was about to be hit, he was already running in her direction. However, he was still a step slower than Hu Jinyao. Or was it because he saw Hu Jinyao appear? So he deliberately let me be a step late? No matter what the reason was, Hu Jinyao stopped the fist that was about to hit Su Qingsang before he did. He breathed a sigh of relief and felt lucky at the same time. Fortunately, she wasn't hurt. Are you okay? These three simple words perfectly hid the concern in the depths of his heart. It sounded like he had to ask, because she was Hu Jinyao's wife. I'm fine. Thank you, uncle. Su Qingsang calmed down and realized that she was hugging Hu Jinyao in the corridor of the hospital. She blushed and quickly moved away from Hu Jinyao's arms. It's okay for now. Hu Jinyao held Su Qingsang's hand and called the police. However, they obviously didn't come as fast as Zhang Yichen. Thank you so much for today. Zhang Yichen shook his head and glanced at Su Qingsang. Her face was pale a moment ago, but now, under Hu Jinyao's comfort, her face returned to normal. She seemed to be a little embarrassed to show off their affection in public. Hu Jinyao held her hand, but she kept trying to pull it away. However, Hu Jinyao held her hand so tightly that she couldn't break free. She couldn't help but look at Hu Jinyao, but he didn't seem to notice her gaze at all. In the end, Su Qingsang felt a little helpless. She gently scratched Hu Jinyao's palm. Hu Jinyao held her hand even tighter because of this. The movement between them didn't seem obvious, but it was full of intimacy. Zhang Yichen was a soldier, so his five senses were much more sensitive than ordinary people. He couldn't help but glance at their hands, which were held together. Noticing Zhang Yichen's gaze, Hua Jingyao raised Su Qingsang's hand. "Uncle, are you jealous? If you're jealous, go find one." Zhang Yichen pursed his lips and completely ignored Hua Jinyao's words. Su Qingsang glared at Hua Jinyao. This man really knew how to make people feel awkward. Most of the people had left, but there were still doctors and nurses in the corridor. They wanted to come over but couldn't. At this moment, they all opened up a path, allowing the people behind them to walk this way. After such a long time, people from the hospital administration and Director Zhou Xiaonan finally heard the news and rushed over. Zhou Xiaonan walked to Su Qingsang as soon as he arrived. "Dr. Su, are you all right?" "I'm fine. Director Zhou, I'm sorry to have made you worry." Zhou Xiaonan looked Su Qingsang up and down to make sure that she was indeed not injured. Then he was more or less relieved. "I'm glad you're fine. I'm glad you're fine." Director Zhou was still discussing with the hospital administration about how to solve the problem when he heard that a group of reporters was fighting downstairs. When they hurried over, the conflict was already over. In fact, many doctors wanted to come over and stop them, and they did try to stop them. However, there were too many of them, and they couldn't do anything. If they did, the situation would be completely different. Therefore, the other doctors standing in the corridor could only try to pull those people away. However, because the number of people was too large, they failed. Now, seeing that Su Qingsang was fine, they were also relieved. In fact, everyone knew what was going on. Everyone was talking about how evil doctors nowadays were, how bad their medical ethics were, and how they only wanted to make money. However, God knew that doctors nowadays were becoming more and more difficult. Patients could make a big fuss over small things. Now that the problem was finally solved, everyone was relieved. They thought that the problem was solved. Hua Jinyao didn't. He looked at Zhou Xiaonan with obvious dissatisfaction in his eyes. "Director Zhou, right? Is this how your hospital treats your doctors?" "That's right. Qingsang hasn't been here for long, but I'm sure you've seen her performance over the past 2 months at the first hospital, right?" Of course, he would do his best to protect his wife. I've seen it. Zhou Xiaonan felt sweat on his back. "This time it's our fault." "Of course it's your fault." Hua Jinyao thought that if he had come a minute later, Su Qingsang would have been beaten up. He couldn't help but be angry. It's obvious that Qingsang was wronged. Not only did you not help her seek justice and prove her innocence, but you also let those medical troublemakers come to your door and make a scene in the hospital like this. Did you think that firing or suspending Qingsang would solve the problem? Not only was Zhou Xiaonan's back sweating, but sweat was also dripping down from his head. Especially when he saw Zhang Yichen standing next to him, he regretted it even more. They couldn't afford to offend Tianyu Group. Now there was another immortal who she did not know where he came from. "I'm sorry. We will definitely give Dr. Su an explanation for this, but please understand. Because they made a big scene. You know that." Zhou Xiaonan didn't finish his sentence, but Hua Jinyao understood what he meant. They didn't want to punish Su Qingsang. But as long as Lin Gang and Li Hong insisted that Su Qingsang insulted them and caused Li Hong's wound to open, that wouldn't be the end of it. Of course, the hospital could let Su Qingsang continue to work, but would the hospital be able to convince the public? Would the patients and their families accept it? These were all problems, and they would cause the hospital trouble in the future. Even if they didn't punish Su Qingsang, how could Su Qingsang continue to work in the first hospital if the problem wasn't solved? After all, she was a doctor. How could she continue to be a doctor if she was criticized for having no medical ethics? Hua Jinyao wanted to curse. She had to go back to her old job after all. They believed that Su Qingsang didn't do anything wrong, but they still had to punish her. Considering that Su Qingsang still had to work in the first hospital, he didn't go too far. "Director Zhou, I understand you, and so does Qingsang. Don't you need to prove the truth to the public? Don't the public want to know the truth? How about this? Give me 3 days. In 3 days, I will prove Su Qingsang's innocence." "Thank you, Mr. Hua." Zhou Xiaonan finally relaxed and smiled. Don't worry, as long as the public believes it, we will let Dr. Su come back to work. What he meant was that even if it wasn't the truth, as long as the public believed it, the problem at hand would be solved. Let Dr. Su rest at home for the next 3 days. Okay. Hua Jingyao nodded. I hope you can understand that Qingseng was wronged. Of course. Of course. Zhou Xiaonan looked at Su Qingseng as he spoke. Dr. Su, you have a good rest at home. You can come back to work after these 3 days. He didn't say how the problem would be solved. The hospital also had a headache. In the past, when there was a medical dispute, they had to give a sum of money to settle it. But this time, if they really gave money, it would give the public the truth. They weren't stupid, and they didn't want that to happen. Thank you, Director Zhou. Su Qingseng was actually quite grateful to them. At least they didn't ask her to go home as soon as she came. At least they were willing to believe her. Zhou Xiaonan wiped the non-existent sweat on his forehead, knowing that they didn't handle it well this time. But now they couldn't find a better way to deal with it. They couldn't offend Tianyu Group, but they also had to consider the public's opinion. While they were talking, the police arrived. They came a little late. The problem was over. They asked about the situation and recorded statements. Then they found Lin Gang and asked about the situation. Lin Gang wouldn't admit that he was a medical dispute patient. He only said that someone behind him pushed him. As for whether he did anything or not, he wouldn't admit it. That's impossible, sir. How could I dare to hit a doctor? He really didn't do anything. He just asked someone else to do it. If someone else wanted to do it, it had nothing to do with him. That's good. If you have any objections to the hospital's treatment, you can appeal in other ways. But I hope you understand that medical dispute is against the law. Yes. We all know that. Don't worry. We won't break the law knowingly. The police intimidated them for a while, and then left. This farce was over for the time being, but everyone knew that it wasn't over yet. They couldn't delete Weibo now. The more they deleted it, the more counterproductive it would be. Su Qingseng was sitting in Hua Jinyao's car. They had just parted ways with Zhang Yichen. Zhang Yichen had asked her a few questions out of concern, but he didn't say much after learning what had happened. He only told Hua Jinyao that the trouble was probably not directed at Su Qingseng, but at Hua Jinyao. Lin Gang and Li Hong didn't go after Sun Huiya, the department director, but Su Qingseng, a junior doctor. Everyone would think that something was wrong. Hua Jinyao had guessed it, but it was rare that Zhang Yichen had the same idea. All right, uncle. Thank you. I know you care about me. Don't worry. I can handle it. Thinking of all the things that had happened in the company recently, Hua Jinyao had reason to believe that both Qiao Hong's trouble and Su Qingsang's trouble were caused by the same person. They thought that he was busy with the company, so they wanted to mess with Su Qingsang first. Then he would be distracted and wouldn't be able to keep an eye on Qiao Hong's trouble. That was a good idea, but it was a pity. That person's plan was doomed to fail, because he had already figured out how to fight back. I'm glad you know. Zhang Yichen looked at Hua Jinyao with a serious face. He wanted to say something, but in the end he didn't. Since everything is settled, I'll go back now. Okay. Thank you for today. Hua Jinyao wasn't being polite. Su Qingseng also said, Thank you, uncle. Zhang Yichen glanced at her and nodded slightly as a response. He didn't linger, but went back to the team with his subordinates. Sitting in the car, Zhang Yichen looked at the passing scenery on both sides of the road. He knew that he had taken on a new mission, so he wouldn't come to Rong City for a while. He didn't have to guess to know that the trouble this time was aimed at Hua Jinyao. Su Qingseng was just suffering from an undeserved disaster. The Hua family's situation wasn't that complicated, but everyone in the family had their own thoughts. With Su Qingsang's personality, she must have suffered a lot, right? If he had been the one to marry such a beautiful and intelligent girl, he wouldn't have let her suffer. Boss, what are you thinking about? His subordinate's voice brought Zhang Yichen back to his senses. He realized that he was thinking about the impossible again. His face was a little gloomy. Boss, Zhang Yichen shook his head and didn't say anything. Those thoughts were once again fiercely suppressed by him. But some things were like that. The more he tried to suppress it, the more it would rebound. Chapter 534. Su Qingsang was sitting in Hu Jinyao's car. She was still a little scared when she thought about how she was almost beaten up. Thank you so much for what you did today. Su Qingsang knew that even if Zhang Yichen hadn't come, the problem would have been solved. However, Zhang Yichen had played a big part in helping those people leave so quickly and easily. Yeah, I'll buy him dinner later. She didn't know when Zhang Yichen would come back to Rong City after he returned to the army. Hu Jinyao thought about the look in Zhang Yichen's eyes and felt a little weird. In the past, Zhang Yichen's uncle had always been a talkative person, but these days, Zhang Yichen didn't seem to like talking much. Was it because he was too tired from the mission? Well, you can invite me when you buy him dinner. He helped me after all. Hu Jinyao didn't object. The weird feeling disappeared because of Su Qingsang's words. Perhaps he was really thinking too much. Su Qingsang looked out at the gradually darkening night sky and thought of the topics related to her that were still on the hot search list. She felt a little down. Noticing her reaction, Hu Jinyao reached out and gently patted the back of her hand. Honey, I said 3 days, so it will be 3 days. Don't worry. How can I not worry? Su Qingsang looked at his chiseled face and said, people like Lin Gang and Li Hong are unreasonable. What can you do as long as they don't admit it? When the police went to record Lin Gang's statement, both Zhou Xiaonan and Director Chen had followed them to watch. They heard what Lin Gang said. He wouldn't let it go so easily. He said he would appeal to the higher authorities and make Su Qingsang pay. Lin Gang said he would appeal to the higher authorities. He won't let me go. That depends on whether he can do it or not. Su Qingsang looked out of the window and didn't notice a flash of anger on Hu Jinyao's face. Tell me, how do you want to deal with unreasonable people like Li Hong and Lin Gang? Honey, I think you're too concerned about them. There was a red light ahead. Hu Jinyao stopped the car and squeezed Su Qingsang's palm. Haven't you ever thought about one thing? What? Su Qingsang turned around. Hu Jinyao looked at her with gentle eyes. This time, I was a little too hasty. He asked someone to delete the Weibo account. However, no matter how big the news was, it would still be popular for a certain period of time. As the popularity died down, no one paid attention to it anymore. Right? Secondly, that person said he was going to appeal and sue you. Does he have proof? Su Qingsang furrowed her brows. She had been neglecting this crucial point. There was no one else in the ward at that time, so no one made the decision for her. But in the same way, if no one testified for her, would anyone testify for Lin Gang? He can say that you insulted the patient, but you can also say that he insulted the doctor. 2 mouths for one matter. It all depends on what you say. What do you think? Lin Gang could only accuse others with his mouth. Now, those people believed that he was bewitched and his emotions were stirred up. There would always be someone who was rational. When those people came to their senses and calmed down, they would realize that this matter was just a farce. Seeing the red light in front of him change color, he stepped on the accelerator again. His last sentence was almost a whisper. However, I don't plan to let this matter drag on for too long. Although he didn't mention any names, even Tianyu Group was brought into the topic. Hu Jinyao was a very sensitive person. As early as this afternoon, when the Weibo post came out, he had already sensed that something was wrong. This time, it wasn't Su Qingsang that they were going to deal with, but him. The Weibo post continued to grow, but Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao didn't pay attention to it anymore. The two of them returned home. Su Qingsang took a shower and changed into a set of comfortable clothes. When she came out, Hu Jinyao was talking on the phone. She didn't ask who he was calling. Anyway, this was what happened now. She just needed to trust him. At night, Su Qingsang lay on the bed and looked at Hu Jinyao, who had just come out of the bathroom. She said, I'm not going to work tomorrow. I'll go back to the old house to visit Grandpa. Okay. Hu Jinyao thought of something else. You have 3 days off. You can also go back to Lin City to visit your mother. Spend some time with your grandfather. When you come back, I'll definitely solve the problem. He asked Su Qingsang to go to Lin City so that she could avoid it. Su Qingsang didn't have that idea. She watched as Hu Jingyao walked to the bed and sat down. She pulled his hand and placed it in her palm. I'm not going back to Lin City. You're not going to see your mother. If you want to see my mother, you can do it anytime. But now, I want to be with you. Su Qingseng looked at Hu Jingyao with watery eyes. She wasn't a fool. After such a long time, she had probably seen through some things. Even if Hu Jingyao could solve it, at this stage, she wanted to be with him. She leaned against the pillow. The dim yellow light of the bedside lamp made her face look as gentle as water. Her small hand gently held his hand. Hu Jingyao held her hand in his palm. He put it to his lips and kissed it gently. He didn't speak, and she didn't speak either. The two of them looked at each other. In their eyes, they could only see each other's shadows. With a bow sound, Hu Jingyao left a kiss on her lips. But he didn't do anything else. He turned around and got on the bed, lying down beside her. He held her in his arms. Su Qingseng pressed against his chest and found the most comfortable position in his arms. She wrapped her arms around Hu Jinyao's waist. Su Qingseng's voice was especially soft. Hu Jinyao, I think I might not be able to fully understand the operations of your company. I might not be able to help you in business like other women. But I think I can be with you. No matter what happened, no matter what she had experienced in the past, and no matter what would happen in the future, she might not be able to help, but she was willing to be with him. Hu Jingyao buried his face in her neck and smelled the faint fragrance of her neck after a bath. Okay. His words were a promise. Su Qingseng smiled and closed her eyes. Hu Jingyao got up early the next day and left. Su Qingseng didn't sleep for long either. Even though she was in a whirlpool now, she believed that everything would be fine, just like the previous few times. According to her original plan, she went to see Old Master Hua. She hadn't sent the gift she bought in Lin City to Old Master Hua yet. Old Master Hua was very happy to see her. Qingseng, you're here? Don't you have to work today? He was old, so it was naturally impossible for him to use Weibo. So he didn't know about Su Qingseng. Su Qingseng didn't intend to tell him. She took out the gift that Li Qianxue and Old Master Li had prepared. Old Master Ho was very happy. Your grandfather is too polite. I must go to Lin City to see him when I have the chance. Okay. My grandfather also wants you to go. Definitely. Definitely. Old Master Hu laughed heartily. I'm not completely old yet. While I'm still young, I want to travel around and see. Grandpa, you're not old at all. You only know how to make me happy. I'm not making you happy. Grandpa looks very energetic. Old Master Hu smiled even more brightly. Su Qingseng also brought two other gifts. One was for Huamingguang, and the other was for Lu Tongjia. They were both picked out by Li Qianxue. It wasn't about how expensive it was, but it was just a thought. It was also very coincidental. Huamingguang and Lu Tongjia were also at home today. Huamingguang had a lot of things to do in the company recently. He had a dinner party yesterday, so he came home late and naturally got up late. Lu Tongjia had an appointment with someone to play basketball today. But when she was about to leave, that person suddenly had something to do and didn't show up. Lu Tongjia's expression didn't look good after being stood up. When she went downstairs and saw Su Qingseng, her eyebrows were tightly knitted, and her expression became even uglier. Huamingguang didn't have any special reaction. When Su Qingseng saw them, she immediately stood up. Dad. Auntie. In fact, this kind of address sounded very strange. It felt as if Lu Tongjia was Huamingguang's second wife. Lu Tongjia didn't hear anything wrong before. But this time, she felt that something was wrong. Dad, I went back to Lin City a few days ago. This is the gift my mother and grandfather chose for you. Okay. Thank you. Huamingguang took the box and didn't open it, but he accepted it. Su Qingseng also handed the other box to Lu Tongjia. Auntie, this is the gift my mother chose for you. Lu Tongjia glanced at the beautifully packaged box. She quickly turned her face away and didn't look at Su Qingseng at all. Su Qingseng was a little embarrassed, but she still pushed the box a little closer to Lu Tongjia. Lu Tongjia didn't respond. Huamingguang glanced at her with a somewhat disapproving expression. Only then did she reach out and pick up the box. Aunt Zhou, who was helping in the kitchen, came out with fruits and tea. Aunt Zhou, this is for you. Lu Tongjia picked up the box and handed it to Aunt Zhou in front of Su Qingsang. Aunt Zhou was stunned for a moment. She had seen clearly just now that this was a gift from young master's sister to Madam. Su Qingsang didn't expect Lu Tongjia to embarrass her so directly. Although she wasn't surprised for a long time, she still wouldn't be happy that something she had given out was directly given to someone else like this. Old Master Hu's brows were tightly knitted. He looked at his daughter-in-law with some dissatisfaction in his eyes. Tongjia. Hua Mingguang, who saw his father's mood, touched Lu Tongjia's arm. Lu Tongjia raised her eyebrows and looked calm. What? Can't I? Since she gave it to me, it's mine. It's mine. Don't I have the right to deal with it? She was right, and no one could refute it. Su Qingsang didn't feel hurt, but she was more or less uncomfortable. However, everyone present was an elder. In the end, she chose to look down at her fingertips and didn't say a word. Old Master Hua's forehead was so wrinkled that it could almost squeeze a shadow. Hua Mingguang also had a faint expression of disapproval on his face. Lu Tongjia handed the box to Aunt Zhou again. Aunt Zhou has been working in our family for so many years. She cooks delicious food and is diligent. It's not too much for me to give her a gift, is it? No one responded to Lu Tongjia, even if it wasn't too much, but she could always do it in private. Tongjia. Old Master Hua's face was now very long. It was obvious that he was unhappy. Hua Mingguang wanted to say something, but Lu Tongjia stood up and stubbornly put the box in Aunt Zhou's hand. What's wrong? Did I say something wrong? Since when do I not even have the right to deal with a gift from a junior? Am I still the mistress of this family? No one answered. Even Old Master Hu didn't say anything at this time. In the past 10 years, ever since his wife passed away, Old Master Hu also admitted that Lu Tongjia was still capable. She took care of the Hu family in an orderly manner. She could also be called Hua Mingguang's good wife. The reason why Hua Mingguang was able to put all his energy into business and run Tianyu Group to where it was now was also because of Lu Tongjia. Old Master Hu didn't say anything. He glanced at Su Qingsang with a guilty expression. Aunt Zhou was still holding the box in her hand. She stood there, not knowing whether to accept the box or not. Seeing this, Su Qingsang smiled and said, Aunt Zhou, it's okay. Since it's a gift to you, just accept it. Aunt Zhou smiled a little awkwardly. She didn't want to get involved in the fight between the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. She bowed and left. Lu Tongjia sat down again opposite Su Qingsang. Her cold eyes swept over Su Qingsang's face. It seems that I will soon lose my place in this family. I even have to give a gift to someone else. It's really... She didn't say anything else, but there was no need to say it. Tongjia. Hua Mingguang tugged at Lu Tongjia's sleeve to stop her. Lu Tongjia's expression was unfriendly, but she didn't say anything else. Because of this matter, the atmosphere in the living room suddenly became a little strange. Old Master Hu looked at Su Qingsang and felt a little guilty. Qingsang was a good girl, but she married Hu Jinyao. However, Hu Jinyao didn't like Lu Tongjia. All right, Qingsang. The jade you gave her has been very noisy recently. Old Master Hu changed the topic. Su Qingsang stood up and said, That's good. I'll go and see it. I'll go with you. Old Master Hu didn't want to stay here to face Lu Tongjia. After so many years, he understood Lu Tongjia's psychological shadow. However, some things were one thing to understand, and another to accept. When they went out of the door, the parrot was indeed chirping. It was very noisy. Seeing that Su Qingsang and Old Master Hu had gone out, it stopped chirping and turned its face away. Old Master Hu looked at the bird. When it was a bird, it chirped loudly, but when someone came, it was cold and aloof. It's really funny for a bird to be like this. Old Master Hu saw that Su Qingsang didn't seem to take what had just happened to heart at all. He was more or less relieved. Qingsang, Jinyao's mother, she actually wasn't like this before. This was the first time that Su Qingsang had heard the Hua family mention the past. She looked at Old Master Hua and couldn't help but look a little nervous. Chapter 535. Old Master Hu closed his eyes. Yes, in the past, when Lu Tongjia had first married into the family, everyone in the Hua family had spoken ill of her. Whether it was him or his wife, they both liked this daughter-in-law very much. He had poise, foresight, and vision. He was magnanimous and didn't fuss about it. He was quite good at dealing with human affairs. Even after Hua Mingliang married Nian Chuanya, whose status was lower than the Hua family, Nian Chuanya came from a humble family and did not have much experience. But he always liked to compete. Hua Yifan, Hua Yang, and Hua Manzi's personalities had become like this because of Nian Chuanya's ignorance. Speaking of which, Lu Tongjia really deserved to be called the mistress of the house. After all, Lu Tongjia was able to handle all the troubles in the Hua family, including the interactions between the relatives. Whether it was his relationship with Nian Chuanya's sisters-in-law or Hua Mingmei's sisters-in-law, he handled them perfectly. Yes, Su Qingsang knew. She glanced at old Master Hua and said, "Then Auntie." He suddenly stopped speaking because old Master Hua's expression had become a little ugly. Su Qingsang's intuition told her that it wasn't something good, so she stopped asking. "It's okay, it's all in the past." Old Master Hua patted the back of Su Qingsang's hand. "Qingsang, in this world, there will always be one or two people who are stubborn. It's easy for her to get stuck in a dead end. Actually, she's not targeting you. Do you understand?" "I understand. Dad, don't worry. I'm not angry and I care." She was curious about what had happened. However, seeing that everyone in the Hua family was tight-lipped, Su Qingsang couldn't bring herself to ask. In short, Jinyao's mother has her own difficulties. You're still young, don't lower yourself to her level. "Don't worry, Grandpa, I won't." "Yes, I know. You are a good boy. It would be great if his wife was still alive. She would be so happy to see her grandson marry such a wife." Su Qingsang didn't respond to old Master Hua. She suddenly thought of Hua Jinyao. In fact, if anyone were to really mind, it should be Hua Jinyao, right? If Hua Jinyao didn't mind, what right did she have to criticize Lu Tongjia? She really wanted to know what had happened to make Lu Tongjia dislike Hua Jinyao so much. However, she would not easily reveal the truth of this matter. If possible, she hoped that one day, when she and Hua Jinyao were close enough to trust each other, he would tell her in person. At that moment, Hua Jinyao was sitting in his office. He didn't look too good. He didn't expect the person who bribed Xiao Hong to be so calm. It had been a few days since the incident, but the other party had yet to contact Xiao Hong or give him the final payment. Was this really an accident? Why didn't he believe it at all? Yang Wenchang stood across the desk and looked at Hua Jinyao in silence. He felt that he was to blame for what had happened. "President Hua, it might also be because of my lack of supervision. I'll keep a closer eye on him. There's no need to send more people." Hua Jinyao waved his hand. The problem was not Xiao Hong, but the person who had contacted Xiao Hong. If that person was the same person who had caused trouble for Su Qingsang, then that person might not have contacted Xiao Hong under the current circumstances. For now, you can put Xiao Hong's matter aside. Someone will keep an eye on him. You don't have to worry about it every day. But there's another matter that needs to be solved urgently. Yang Wenchang knew what Hua Jinyao was talking about without needing to say it. "You mean Mrs. Hua?" Hua Jinyao nodded, then told Yang Wenchang his plan. Yang Wenchang nodded repeatedly. "President Hua, you're the best." Was he? Hua Jinyao didn't think so. He was just good at reading people's minds. "Remember, you handle this matter yourself. Don't let anyone else do it." "Yes. One more thing." Thinking of what had happened recently, Hua Jinyao's face was unusually serious. "Don't let anyone else know about this except for you." Yang Wenchang understood immediately. "Don't worry, President Hua. I know what I'm doing. Go." Hua Jinyao waved his hand and gestured for Yang Wenchang to leave. He took the document with Hua Jinyao's signature and walked out. He bumped into Ding Qing the moment he walked out of Hua Jinyao's office. She was holding a stack of documents in her hands. "Assistant Yang, you got another job?" Ding Qing looked at Yang Wenchang with a big smile on her face. Yang Wenchang nodded and said, "Yeah, I got another job. I'm going now." "Assistant Yang, why don't you tell me what it is? Maybe I can help." "No need." Yang Wenchang looked at Ding Qing and thought of what Hua Jinyao had said. Ding Qing could be trusted for now, but if he couldn't even trust his own brother, then he wouldn't trust Ding Qing at all. Assistant Yang, don't you trust me? If that's the case, I'm really sad. You're overthinking. Yang Wenchang shook his head. It's just a small matter. I can handle it. Ding Qing stood there without moving. Yang Wenchang added, President Hu told me to keep an eye on Xiao Hong. I think that the person behind the scenes will definitely contact him soon. So I'm leaving. Oh, you need to hurry up. Ding Qing kindly suggested to Yang Wenchang. Xiao Hong received 2 million from President Hua. If he goes abroad with his girlfriend, we won't be able to find him even if we want to. That's what I said. Yang Wenchang nodded, as if he was influenced by Ding Qing's words. I'm leaving now. Take care, Assistant Yang. Yang Wenchang disappeared behind the elevator. Ding Qing bit her lower lip with a bright smile on her face. Keep an eye on Xiao Hong? She wanted to see what kind of results Yang Wenchang could get. Thinking about it, it was quite interesting. Lin Gang had been proud of himself lately. His wife was giving birth in the hospital, but all the people in the hospital treated them like servants. Recently, someone had given him a large sum of money and told him to keep an eye on Su Qingseng. He couldn't let her live a good life. That kind of thing couldn't be easier for him. Look, even Li Hong only cared about money. Now her conscience is acting up again, and she's now thinking about money, thinking that he would soon live in a big villa and drive a luxurious car. Lin Gang felt that he would wake up laughing even in his dreams. As a result, Li Hong became more pleasing to the eye. After all, if that *TCH hadn't been smart enough to change her mind, he wouldn't have had the money to spend now. He was so proud of himself that he could even walk like the wind. When he was rich, no one would dare to look down on him anymore. He was so proud of himself that he almost walked with his nose in the air. He lowered his head at the sound of a girl's voice. His eyes lit up when he saw the person in front of him. Oh, isn't this Lin Gang? What's wrong? Old classmate, don't you recognize me? The woman in front of him raised her eyebrows and looked at Lin Gang coquettishly. You are Wenfei? Looking at the expensive clothes on the man, Lin Gang's eyes widened. His eyes scanned the man from head to toe like X-rays. The diamond on her chest was real, wasn't it? And the watch on her wrist looked expensive. How come he didn't know that this classmate of his had become so successful after so many years? Yes, it's me. Wenfei looked Lin Gang up and down. Old classmate, I haven't seen you for a long time. I didn't expect you to still be so beautiful. You're too kind. Lin Gang, who had been bossy in front of Su Qingseng and arrogant to everyone else in the hospital, was smiling like a blooming flower. Wenfei used to be the most beautiful girl in the class, Lin Gang could only look up to the most beautiful girl in the class. He felt that it was blasphemy to even look at her. He didn't expect that the most beautiful girl in the class would still remember him, which made him feel so happy. Old classmate, it's fate that we met. Why don't we have dinner together? Okay. Hearing Wenfei's words, Lin Gang almost forgot that he had left the hospital to go home and buy dinner for Li Hong. Okay, let's go. Wenfei took Lin Gang to a restaurant in a 5-star hotel nearby. Lin Gang had always been a scammer and had met many rich people. But this was the first time he had been to a place like this. For a moment, he didn't know where to put his hands and feet. Old classmate, look at you. Don't be so polite. This hotel is mine now. You? Lin Gang was so astonished that his eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. Yeah. Surprised, right? Let's go. Lin Gang didn't believe her at first. However, as he followed Wenfei into the restaurant, the waiters on both sides bowed and greeted her. Lin Gang was shocked by such a scene. He kept his body close to Wenfei's back and didn't dare to look around. Lin Gang didn't relax until they entered the private room. Wenfei acted as if she didn't notice his uneasiness. She called the waiters over and began to serve tea and dishes for Lin Gang. She didn't even look at the menu and directly asked them to serve the most expensive dishes in the restaurant. Old classmate, this lobster from Australia was just flown in today. It's fresh. I hope you like it. Wenfei said it politely, but the carelessness in her tone shocked Lin Gang. How come? Australian lobster? He had only seen it on TV. How could he have the chance to see it in real life? And a bottle of 1982 Lafite. Wen Fei said with an embarrassed look on her face. Old classmate, I'm really sorry. In fact, this Lafite is very famous. In fact, there are many European wineries that have better wines than Lafite. However, Lafite is very famous in China. It can't be helped. Some people just like its name. Please don't take it to heart. No. Lin Gang didn't know where to put his hands and feet again. Australian lobster 1982 Lafite. Top French foie gras. These ingredients that Lin Gang had only heard of but never seen were brought to the table one by one. Like a noble lady, Wen Fei held the knife and fork elegantly and taught Lin Gang how to use it. She didn't dislike it at all. At first, Lin Gang felt uncomfortable. After 2 glasses of wine, he relaxed. Wen Fei didn't dislike him at all. Instead, she was very gentle. She also taught him how to use the knife and fork, how to taste wine, and how to eat Australian lobster. Lin Gang's eyes lit up. Wen Fei, I didn't expect that you could become like this. What's wrong? Are you surprised? Yes, I'm surprised. I still remember that your family was not very rich in the past. In fact, everyone was similar. But compared to the current situation, it was very ordinary. Yes, I didn't expect that either. Wen Fei picked up the wine in front of her and gently swirled the glass. She seemed to be very emotional. What's wrong? Miss Wen, you are so good now. Why are you still unhappy? Wen Fei looked at Lin Gang's red face and sighed. She didn't look as happy as before. Instead, she looked sad. Lin Gang had drunk a lot of wine, so he was no longer as cowardly as before. Even the way he addressed her changed. Miss Wen, if you have any difficulties, just tell me. I can do it. I promise I will help you. Although I can't help you much with my ability and my current situation. You may dislike me. Old classmate, what are you talking about? I don't have the right to dislike others now. You don't have the right to dislike others with your current situation? Look at me. Those people should be disliked by you. Miss Wen, what do you mean? Wen Fei put down the glass and sighed. We are classmates. There is nothing to be ashamed of. I'll be frank with you. Now I really want to listen to other people's advice. Go ahead. I'm listening. To show that he was listening to her carefully, Lin Gang shook his head and patted his face to make himself more clear-headed. After sighing, Wen Fei finally began to talk. It turned out that the hotel belonged to her. But it was actually her husband's. Why did her husband give her this hotel? To make up for it. She got to know her husband by accident. At first, she thought he was a poor boy. Later, she found out he was rich. She didn't deserve him, but her husband treated her very well. She became a rich young lady that everyone envied. The only problem was that she and her husband had been married for many years, but they never had a child. Her mother-in-law used to push her a lot. Later, when she found out she didn't want to have a child, she began to make things difficult for her. Because she couldn't have a child, she endured it all. Her husband was a good man. He treated her very well. For her sake, he always went against her mother-in-law. However, she didn't expect that until this year, the 10th year of their marriage, she finally found out by chance that her husband had azoospermia. In other words, the reason why she couldn't have a child was not because of herself, but because of her husband. Knowing the truth, she was sad. Although she really wanted a child, she accepted her fate. She just couldn't have a child. She had a good relationship with her husband. The two of them were happy to live together. However, when her mother-in-law found out that the person who couldn't have a child was her husband, she came up with a bad idea. Her mother-in-law wanted her to borrow her brother-in-law's seed and have a child. How could Wen Fei agree to such a ridiculous idea? She refused. No matter how her mother-in-law threatened or tempted her, she refused without hesitation. However, her mother-in-law was angry. Her mother-in-law wanted her to divorce her husband. Her husband loved her, but her mother made a big fuss. He really couldn't have a child. In the end, he agreed to the divorce, but he gave her this hotel as compensation. He said that she wasted 10 years of her youth, so he gave her a hotel as compensation. He hoped that she could find a man who could have a child and treat her well. Then they could live happily. Wen Fei picked up the glass and took another sip. Tell me, how can I be happy now? My husband is gone. I don't have a child. My husband asked me to find another one. But he was so good to me. Where else can I find a better man than him? After a few more glasses, Wenfei cried. Why? Why is my life so hard? Why can't I have a child? If only I could have my own child. If only my husband could have a child. How wonderful would that be? Lin Gang was drunk. He listened to Wenfei with red eyes. He didn't expect her to have such a legendary experience. Don't cry. I think it's fate. Not to mention that you have this hotel. A hotel. Tut tut, Wenfei's husband is so generous. Lin Gang tried to control the jealousy in his words. Wenfei raised her head. Her eye makeup was ruined, and there were tear stains on her face. What's the use of this hotel? I don't have a husband or a child. I'm still young now, but in a few years, I'll feel like my heart is soaked in ice water, when I don't even have someone to take care of me. Lin Gang took out a tissue to wipe her tears, but when he heard what she said, his hand was suspended in the air. Looking at Wenfei's young face, Lin Gang thought of his secret love for her. More importantly, an extremely daring and crazy idea emerged in his mind. Wenfei's husband couldn't have a child, but he could. What was so hard about being nice to her, and taking care of her like her husband did? If he could do that, he would have a share in this hotel. Thinking of this, Lin Gang's face turned redder. It was because of excitement. Wenfei calmed down. She wiped her tears and looked at Lin Gang. Look at me. I should be happy to see my old classmate, but I just said something to dampen the mood. Speaking of which, you are about the same age as me. You should be married and have children, right? Looking at Wenfei's teary eyes, Lin Gang couldn't suppress the crazy idea he had just had. Yes, I'm married. But what's wrong? Old classmate, if you have any difficulties, you can tell me. I promise I'll try my best to help you. Speaking of which, it's really unfortunate. I've been married to my wife for years. She finally got pregnant this year. But she was hit by a car last month. 2 lives. Poor me. Lin Gang couldn't make up the rest of the story. But it didn't affect his acting. He lowered his head and pretended to cry. Wenfei looked at him with sympathy. I didn't expect it, old classmate. We're in the same boat now. As she spoke, she took out a tissue to wipe Lin Gang's tears. She saw that he was still unhappy. She patted the back of his hand. The dead are gone. You'd better take care of yourself. Lin Gang looked at her hand, that was still on the back of his hand. The calculation in his eyes became more and more obvious, but he hid it by wiping his tears. Wenfei, we're in the same boat now. Yeah, we can talk more in the future. Sit. I don't have anything to do now. When you have time, come to this hotel to see me. The presidential suite upstairs is fixed to my room. As long as I'm here, you can come anytime. Wenfei's words made Lin Gang's imagination run wild. He looked at Wenfei's face, which was much prettier than that *tch of his. Lin Gang's eyes lit up. There's a door. Alcohol rushed into his brain, and sex moved his heart. The more Lin Gang thought about it, the more excited he became. As for Li Hong, who was still waiting for him to bring her food, he had already forgotten about her. That night, Su Qingsang checked Weibo again. It was just as Hua Jinyao had said. Although it was still on the hot search list, the number of people commenting and reposting it was obviously not as many as it was yesterday. It seemed that she only needed to wait for the popularity of this incident to die down. Things wouldn't be hard to deal with later. Lin Gang and Li Hong said they were going to blackmail Su Qingsang when they were pregnant. How smart could they be? Maybe it was for money. She wasn't looking down on Lin Gang. She could tell from Lin Gang's behavior yesterday. If he didn't want people to say that he did it for money, he would have agreed to the price and the conditions of the negotiation. Are you still reading Weibo? Hua Jinyao walked out of the bathroom and saw that Su Qingsang's phone was on. He took his hand out of Su Qingsang's and put it aside. Don't read it. It affects your mood. Don't worry. My heart is like an iron wall now. Reading Weibo won't affect me at all. Iron wall. Hua Jinyao raised his eyebrows and put his hand on Su Qingsang's chest. Let me see. Why is it so soft? Why is it so soft? It's not an iron wall at all. Stop it. Su Qingsang reached out to pull his hand away. Hua Jinyao put both hands on her chest, lowered his head, and kissed Su Qingsang's lips. His lips were soft and warm, with a faint minty taste after washing his face and rinsing his mouth. Su Qingsang was mesmerized by his kiss. Many things had happened recently, so she wasn't in the mood. But his kiss ignited the flame in her. She put her hands on his shoulders and welcomed his hardness with softness. Under his gentleness, those troublesome things seemed to no longer exist. Even if there was no news, she was willing to believe that Lin Gang's problem would be solved in 3 days. She would rest at home for the next 2 days. She would read books and listen to music. She would not care about what was going on outside. Every night, she would study new dishes with Ms. Yu. At night, she would make love to Hu Jiniao. She wouldn't ask him about the company or Lin Gang. She trusted him with all her heart. She believed in what he said. Chapter 536. In fact, it only took her 3 days. During those 3 days, some people were still thinking about it. Some people were paying attention to it. Fewer people reposted the post, but some reporters came to the hospital to ask about the situation. The gynecology and obstetrics department also came to see Su Qingsang. They wanted to know where the arrogant doctor came from. Unfortunately, Su Qingsang was on vacation. They couldn't see her in person. Therefore, a Weibo post said that the hospital had already dealt with Su Qingsang and fired her. But soon they received new rebuttals. After all, Su Qingsang's photo was still hanging on the wall. How could she be fired? The popularity of the post dropped a little, but the people who paid attention to it and the incident itself were still there. Lin Gang still insisted on what he said. But the strange thing was that he refused to be interviewed by reporters, and he didn't want to show his true face in front of the camera. Because he didn't want to show his face to the reporters, 2 reporters from tabloids started to doubt him. They kept asking Lin Gang about what happened, but Lin Gang wasn't as firm as he had been 2 days ago. Things that were already set in stone suddenly seemed to have a reversal. Li Hong didn't expect her husband to lose his memory. She thought about Lin Gang's strange behavior these days. Li Hong immediately sensed that something was wrong. She couldn't ask in front of the reporters. After the reporters left, Li Hong started to ask. Lin Gang didn't have the patience to deal with her. He turned around and walked away. The whole process was witnessed by others. There was a reporter behind him. He was from a live broadcast platform. He said that he wanted to interview Lin Gang and stand up for him. Lin Gang didn't have time to talk to him. That reporter went to interview Li Hong. Li Hong complained to the reporter again, as she had said before. The reporter got the interview with Li Hong, but he didn't publish it immediately. Instead, he chose to interview Lin Gang again. The reporter's idea was simple. He wanted the couple to cry together. That way, the effect would be better than one person. However, he didn't expect that Lin Gang would be exposed. The reporter asked Lin Gang if Su Qingsang had any details about how she insulted the pregnant woman. Lin Gang didn't know. What he said later didn't match what Li Hong had told him. That reporter suddenly realized that something was wrong. That night, when both of them were in the ward, he locked the door. He told Li Hong what Lin Gang had said. She asked Li Hong what happened. Why did the 2 of them have nothing to say? Li Hong didn't expect her husband to be so stupid that he made a mistake. It was just a few words, but Lin Gang's anger was ignited. He quarreled with Li Honglu. The reporter recorded the entire process. Li Hong and Lin Gang quarreled more and more fiercely. In the end, in a fit of anger, she told the truth. You're the one who asked me to frame Dr. Su. You're the one who told me that as long as we accuse Dr. Su, we can get a large sum of money. What do you mean by this attitude? What do you mean I told you to frame Dr. Su? Aren't you greedy for money yourself? If you weren't greedy for money, would you have tried to scam someone and gotten hit by a car? Why would I do that? Isn't it because you asked me to? You're not the one who asked me to frame Dr. Su. Didn't you also ask me to frame him? Li Hong was furious. She didn't expect that Lin Gang would put all the blame on her. If you didn't ask me to lie for money, would I have done such an ungrateful thing? Dr. Su was her lifesaver. You did what I asked you to do. You did what I asked you to do. Why didn't you do it when I asked you to die? Lin Gang was so angry that he slapped Li Hong across the face, regardless of whether she was still recovering from her confinement or not. The reporter sitting in the ward widened his eyes and looked at the breaking news in front of him. He was so shocked that his jaw dropped. This reporter wasn't an ordinary reporter. He already had some fans on this live broadcast platform. From the moment he entered the ward to the moment he interviewed Lin Gang and Li Hong, he had been live streaming the whole thing. From the moment he entered the ward to the moment he interviewed Lin Gang and Li Hong, he had been live streaming the whole thing. What else couldn't he understand? The two of them were making a scene in the hospital. A shameless and shameless one at that. Li Hong was weak. She was no match for Lin Gang. Lin Gang slapped her several times. Lying on the bed, her face was pale, but she was unwilling to admit defeat. All she could do was to cling to Lin Gang and accuse him. Lin Gang even forgot that there was a reporter in the ward. All he cared about was venting his anger. Seeing that Li Hong was about to die, the reporter hurried to call the doctor. He never turned off the camera on his phone. Now, not only did Lin Gang slander Su Qingsang and a medical worker, but he also used domestic violence. The number of people who reposted the news on Weibo was equal to the number of people who had been cheated. Soon, some of the car owners who had been blackmailed by Lin Gang and Li Hong stood out. They said that they knew Lin Gang and Li Hong, and that they were professional blackmailers. They said that they knew Li Hong and Li Hong, and that they were professional blackmailers. Several car owners came out to speak for themselves, saying how shameless Lin Gang was, and how shameless he was for money. With these videos and the live broadcast this time, Chen Fan was very excited. No one believed Lin Gang's words anymore. His accusation had lost its effect. He had proved Su Qingsang's innocence. Even the big shot on Weibo, who had exposed Li Hong's story in the first place, was completely silent. He just deleted the original post. Not only the big shot on Weibo, many people followed suit and deleted their posts as well. Since the original post was deleted, so were the reposts. After the original post was deleted, doctor-patient relationship became a hot topic again. Many people began to reflect on whether they had been too strict with doctors. Some people even said that people like Li Hong and Lin Gang shouldn't have saved them. They should have just let them die. After all, people like Li Hong and Lin Gang didn't deserve to be saved. Why did they save them? Soon, a new topic appeared on Rome City's local hot search list. #comment on the most beautiful doctor in my heart. Many people came out to praise the doctor. Some of them even praised Su Qingsang. Some people had seen Su Qingsang's patients before. Now they stood out and said that they had seen Su Qingsang's patients, and that she was very nice. Blah blah blah. That kind of people. Although these people were criticized for saying things after the fact. In any case, the danger that had a huge impact on Su Qingsang this time was over. On the afternoon of the third day, since the live broadcast reporter published the news, all the comments that were negative about the doctor and Su Qingsang disappeared. The rest of the comments were all praising the doctor. They said that the doctor had to bear the unfair criticism while saving people. At last, the first hospital of the city released an official post on Weibo. They said that they would keep their hearts and continue to save people. They would praise Su Qingsang. They also welcomed people from all walks of life to supervise the doctor's work. They would do a better job. It was a good official post, but no one cared anymore. Instead, many people liked it. In just a few short hours, the situation had changed dramatically. Su Qingsang was taken aback by the whole process. She had been paying attention to the incident since the live broadcast. After all, it was the third day and she was really bored. She wanted to know what was going on. She knew that Lin Gang was the key to the problem, but she didn't expect that Lin Gang would change his mind in such a short time. How could this be? She knew that the problem would be solved sooner or later, but it was solved too fast. She couldn't help but look at Hu Jinniao. She didn't believe that Hu Jinniao had nothing to do with it. Let's eat. That day, Hu Jinniao came back early just to see the result. Su Qingsang looked up at him with a strange look in her eyes. What did you do? You eat first. Then I'll tell you what I did. Hu Jinniao's voice was filled with a faint smile. It was not surprising that the problem could be solved like this. People like Lin Gang were only after money. Money could move people's hearts. As long as the temptation was big enough, he would even sell his wife, let alone tell the truth. Of course, the premise was that the person couldn't be Hu Jiniao. He was Su Qingsang's husband. If he showed up, even if he asked someone to do it, Hu Jiniao wouldn't be able to do it. Hu Jiniao wanted to help Su Qingsang, but he couldn't. Instead, he would hurt her. Since Lin Gang liked money, Hu Jiniao would let someone with more money do this kind of thing. Wen Fei, who owned a hotel, was the person Hu Jiniao had arranged. After Lin Gang's case, Hu Jiniao only spent half a day to find out everything about him. After what happened to Lin Gang, Hu Jiniao spent only half a day to find out everything about Lin Gang's family. Where did he go to school? What did he do? Everything was clear. Lin Gang only graduated from high school. He didn't go to college, so he opened a small shop near his home. His business was good a few years ago. Unfortunately, more and more people liked to shop in big supermarkets. Online shopping was booming again. In recent years, Lin Gang's business had become more and more difficult. Plus, he had a bad temper. His shop was not doing well, so he always thought of asking his wife to blackmail people. Coincidentally, his shop was frequented by people who came to play mahjong. His mahjong friends didn't do their jobs. Every time Li Hong went out to blackmail people, they would threaten her from behind. When they met unreasonable people, they would take advantage of their numbers. Or they would ask Li Hong to pretend to be pitiful. When they met soft targets, they would bite them. That was how he spent the past 2 years. Since Li Hong was in trouble, he wanted to blackmail Su Qingsang. The more money he could, the better. However, before he could blackmail Su Qingsang, someone came to Lin Gang, offered him money, and told him to bite Su Qingsang no matter what. Not only would he earn money, but he could also extort money from Su Qingsang. How could Lin Gang refuse such a good deal? At first, Li Hong still had a conscience. She didn't want to do that. But after Lin Gang threatened her, she agreed. However, no matter how much money was offered to Lin Gang, it was no more than 100,000 or 200,000. But Wen Fei was different. Wen Fei's restaurant was a hotel. How much money could a hotel cost? Especially after Lin Gang had a great time yesterday and was invited to the presidential suite upstairs by Wen Fei. He couldn't believe his eyes. Wen Fei kept saying that she didn't have a child, which satisfied him even more. Wen Fei's husband couldn't have a child, but he could. Anyway, his wife couldn't have a child anymore. Now she had a little girl. Look at the young and beautiful Wen Fei, and then look at his old and ugly Li Hong, who couldn't give him a child. Anyone with a brain would know which one to choose. Lin Gang had an idea after making a comparison. Of course, he wouldn't return the money given by that person. Anyway, that person asked him to blackmail Su Qingsang, and he did it. As long as he didn't change his mind, he would be fine. However, he didn't expect to meet Wen Fei. Even though they had only been together for 2 days, he felt that Wen Fei was the woman he was destined to be with. Wen Fei was gentle, beautiful, and considerate. Most importantly, she was rich. A hotel was nothing compared to the 100,000 that person had given him. Lin Gang had already figured out how to win Wen Fei's heart. He even started to dream about what his life would be like after he won Wen Fei's heart. Under such circumstances, of course, Lin Gang didn't want his face to appear on TV. Therefore, even though he had been very arrogant before, he began to hide when he saw the reporters. He didn't dare to confront the reporters face to face. Most importantly, he thought that he would soon get a hotel, so he didn't care about the compensation. All he could think about was how to be with Wen Fei, and how to make that hotel his. Hu Jiniao really knew how to find the weaknesses of people like that. Maybe Lin Gang thought that it was too easy to mess with Su Qingsang. He felt proud. He felt that it was time for him to change. He didn't believe that it was a trap or a trap for him at all. It was precisely because of Wen Fei's existence that he found his wife more and more unpleasant to the eye. He told Wen Fei that his wife was dead, and that was what he really thought. Now that everything was over, he would soon have a new happy life. Of course, he thought that Li Hong made her angry. People like Lin Gang were carried away by success. Especially after Wen Fei seemed to hint at him a few times. He felt that he had more hope. He went to a 5-star hotel every day. He was called boss, had a beautiful woman by his side, and would have a son to inherit his family. Lin Gang had fallen into such a sweet dream. He didn't think about the illogic of it at all. Or maybe it was the dream he had when he was young, or his obsession with Wenfei made him ignore the illogic. He didn't even think about why Wenfei would want to be with him, considering his current situation. That's it. Su Qingsang stared at Hu Jinyao with her eyes wide open. She couldn't believe that the problem could be solved so easily. What else? He trusts people too easily, doesn't he? Su Qingsang felt that it was a bit magical. Chapter 537. Su Qingsang thought it was too easy for Lin Gang. It's not easy. That's not an ordinary person. She's the goddess of his school. She was the prettiest girl in his class. Hu Jinyao didn't think that Lin Gang trusted people easily. He just had the right time, the right place, and the right people. Oh right. How do you know that Wenfei is the prettiest girl in his class? Hu Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang's twinkling eyes, which were like stars in the night sky, and smiled. Kiss me, and I'll tell you. Not serious. Su Qingsang looked at him, but didn't kiss him. She thought of something else. Well, you also said that Wenfei was the one who asked her to approach Lin Gang. What if Lin Gang doesn't let her go? I said kiss me and I'll tell you. This guy is really... Su Qingsang leaned over and kissed him. Hu Jinyao didn't think it was enough, so he held her and kissed her deeply. He didn't let her go until she was out of breath. He could kiss her if he wanted to, but he liked to see her blush. Her shy and angry eyes were especially attractive. Hu Jinyao couldn't help but lean over and kiss her cheek again. Can you tell me now? I was too naive when I deleted the Weibo post that day. Later, when the news got out, I asked Yang Wenchang to investigate Lin Gang. It didn't take long to find out everything about a person like Lin Gang. It turned out that Lin Gang had been thinking about Wenfei for the past 3 years in high school, instead of focusing on his studies. But Wenfei didn't like him. This was an excellent point of use. If it were someone else, it might work, but it wouldn't be so fast. Lin Gang was a young goddess, and he didn't have a child. Lin Gang just happened to want a child. All the conditions met Lin Gang's needs. Under such circumstances, it was too easy to make him fall in love with Wenfei. As long as Wenfei took him to her hotel for a visit and a meal, he would fall in love with her. As long as Wenfei made herself sound more helpless and pitiful, Lin Gang was blinded by her beauty. How could he know that Wenfei had been acting in front of him all along? He was more willing to believe what he saw with his own eyes, seeing Wenfei being addressed as Boss Wen. Then, he looked at Wenfei, who was dressed in famous brands and had an elegant demeanor. How could he have known that Wenfei was faking it all? This was much easier than sending people to deal with people like Lin Gang. Su Qingsang nodded, and looked at Hu Jinyao with eyes that were much brighter than before. You're amazing. He was able to investigate so many things in such a short period of time, and even arrange for Wenfei's appearance in such a short period of time. Most importantly, there was no trace of an arrangement, and Lin Gang believed it. This was already very impressive. Hu Jinyao's lips curled up, and there was a faint smile on his handsome face. Hugging her waist, he gave her another kiss on the cheek. Wife, please continue. Continue. Yes. Keep complimenting me. I love to hear it. Su Qingsang looked at him. She didn't roll her eyes like she usually did. Instead, she put her arms around his neck and looked into his eyes. I can't. Even if you can't, you still have to. Hu Jinyao put his hand on her waist and said threateningly, Tell me. All right. You're the best. Who am I? Hu Jinyao's hand slightly tightened. How could Su Qingsang not know his special skill? She was afraid that he would tickle her, so she hurriedly begged for mercy and told him what he wanted to hear. My husband is the best. What else? My husband is the most handsome. What else? Hu Jinyao moved his face closer to hers. Su Qingsang was very embarrassed. My husband is the best. Okay. She really couldn't find the words to say. Even if she really wanted to compliment him, she couldn't handle the situation. Hu Jinyao slightly narrowed his eyes. He felt that this compliment was completely true to his name. Wife, do you think I'm not the best? His hand on her waist gently moved to the back of her waist. Su Qingsang couldn't be clearer about the reason for the sudden change of direction. Yes, I'm the best. I already said it. Nothing. I just feel that since you're so sure of my ability, I should do my best. Of course I have to perform well. Don't you think so? Perform? How? Of course he had to show her that he was capable. Su Qingseng didn't know what was going on. She hurriedly put her hand on his chest. She stepped back and kept half an arm's length away from him. You haven't told me yet. What if Lin Gang gets involved with Wenfei? Don't worry about that. She won't. Are you so sure? Of course I'm sure. Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qingseng and gently pinched her cheek. Wenfei will go abroad in a few days. Where will Lin Gang find her then? Go abroad? Yes. Hua Jinyao nodded. There was actually a reason why he went to Wenfei. Wenfei's story was fake. She had a son. Her son was born with congenital heart disease. He needed a transplant. All these years, Wenfei's husband divorced her and abandoned her because of the treatment fee and the child. Her husband didn't want to save the child, but Wenfei couldn't give up. She wanted to give the child the operation, wanted the child to have a healthy body. However, she was poor and had no money. All these years, she could only watch her sick son grow up slowly. Finally, last week, she received news from the United States that there was a suitable heart source. But she needed money. Wenfei was so anxious that her hair turned white. She needed money. She needed a lot of money to pay for the operation. When Yang Wenchang came to her, she agreed without hesitation. Once she got the money, she would take her son abroad to do a heart transplant. How could Lin Gang find her? She's a poor girl. Sort of. Wenfei had a strong resistance to lying to others. Especially when that person was her former classmate. However, when Yang Wenchang told Wenfei what Lin Gang had done, Wenfei finally agreed. Speaking of which, Wenfei is not only a poor girl. She is also a very capable person. Hua Jinyao thought of the information Yang Wenchang gave him. He said that Wenfei had been busy making a living and taking care of her son. She had a good job, but she lost it. She had to do some odd jobs. She had a good temperament. She put on clothes and put on makeup. Then, she would look more energetic. Yang Wenchang hired an etiquette teacher to teach Wenfei how to taste wine and how to eat Western food. She taught Wenfei how to pretend to be a qualified rich wife. Wenfei was really good at it. She learned 70% of it in one night. If she had been dining with people from the upper class, it would have been obvious. However, it was Lin Gang, so it was impossible to tell. She's quite capable. Yeah. Hua Jinyao nodded. Wenfei came from an ordinary family. She had studied business. If she hadn't been a burden to her son and her husband, she would have achieved great things in her career. Since you admire her so much, why don't you invite her to work in your company? Su Qingseng said that not because she was jealous. She simply thought that Wenfei's life was quite amazing. She was born with such qualifications, and she wasn't blinded by money. She didn't give up on her son and took responsibility. Su Qingseng had a good impression of Wenfei even though they hadn't met. Stop. Yang Wenchang is the one who admires her. Yang Wenchang was the one who arranged this. After he came back, he kept saying that Wenfei was a good person and a talent. There was a tinge of pity in his words. He didn't mean anything else. He just thought that Wenfei was a rare talent. We'll see. I don't think she's in the mood to work now. Wenfei had already contacted the doctor there. She would be taken out in a couple of days. The recovery period of a heart transplant was not a day or two. If she went back to China, it would be possible for Tianyu to invite such a kind-hearted person to work for her. Su Qingseng thought of Lin Gang and Wenfei's husband and felt a little emotional. Do you think that men are born crueler than women? What are you trying to say? He was also a man. What did she mean by that? Hua Jinyao narrowed his eyes slightly. He looked as if he was going to punish Su Qingseng if she said that his plan was too much. No, I'm not talking about you. Su Qingseng worked in the hospital and had seen a lot of people die. There were true feelings in the world, but there were also a lot of people who were not good people. Some children are born unhealthy, sick, and the ones who want to abandon them are often men. Most mothers don't want to abandon their children. You seem to be talking about Wenfei. She works so hard because her husband is irresponsible. Look at Lin Gang. His wife is pregnant, but he still let Li Hong continue to cheat. He doesn't care about his wife's life at all. After the baby was born, he had to move it out of the incubator after a few days. To be honest, it was lucky that the baby was strong and nothing bad happened to him. If an accident really happened because of improper treatment, wouldn't they blame the hospital for being responsible? Hua Jinyao couldn't answer that question. He pulled Su Qingseng into his arms and let her sit on his lap. Honey, there is sunshine in this world, and there will be shadows. I can't promise others, but I can promise myself. Hua Jinyao held Su Qingseng's hand, brought it to his lips, and kissed it gently. He looked into her eyes very seriously. I can promise you, I will never be like them. His voice was deep, magnetic, and sexy at the same time. The determination in his eyes made Su Qingseng's heart skip a beat. She nodded her head lightly. That was the trust she had in her. Hua Jinyao kissed her lips again. She trusted him with all her heart. The expression on her face was so beautiful that he couldn't help it. Su Qingseng felt the gentleness in his kiss. Her eyes were watery. She had been married to Hua Jinyao for more than half a year. She had been learning how to be a good wife. She had been learning how to deal with the relationship between husband and wife, and her husband's family. Most importantly, she had to learn to trust a person and a man at that. It wasn't easy for her. Even though she was Li Qianshua's daughter, she was more sensitive and suspicious than others, because she had been born as an illegitimate daughter. She hid her sensitivity, but it didn't mean that it wasn't there. Now, she thought that she could trust Hua Jinyao. She could give him her trust bit by bit, until she trusted him completely. She believed that he was behind her, that he would always stand behind her and support her. She believed in his feelings for her, and believed that he would never betray her. Lin Gang's matter was over after this incident. Li Hong was a liar. She was as arrogant as she was before, and now she was as cowardly as she was now. The doctors and nurses in the hospital wouldn't make things difficult for her, but they couldn't be nice to her. Li Hong could accept that. However, after the incident that day, Lin Gang had disappeared. He didn't answer her calls or reply to her messages. She didn't know where Lin Gang had gone or what was going on. She had been starving for half a day, but no one brought her food. The doctors and nurses in the hospital didn't like medical disputes. They couldn't kick her out. However, she had made such a big fuss that no one came to ask if she had eaten or not. No other pregnant women were sent to this ward. Since Li Hong is such a troublemaker, I'll let her do whatever she wants. Poor Li Hong. Lin Gang was the only one who took care of her. She had a daughter, so Lin Gang didn't really care about her. Now Lin Gang didn't even show up. Li Hong didn't know what to do. Fortunately, the car owner was a nice person and left her some money. A few days ago, some people came to sympathize with Li Hong, and some family members of the patients who didn't know the truth gave Li Hong red envelopes. Otherwise, she wouldn't even have enough money to eat. She couldn't contact Lin Gang, let alone her relatives. Li Hong had a baby all by herself. Her wounds hurt, and she had to do everything by herself. Her face turned paler and paler. Su Qingseng came to the hospital and found Li Hong's miserable condition during her routine ward rounds. She wasn't being soft-hearted. After all, Li Hong was still in the hospital. She asked a caregiver to keep an eye on her. She knew that Lin Gang must be busy trying to please Wen Fei, who was putting on a show with him. He didn't have time to care about Li Hong. Li Meilin laughed at Su Qingseng's carelessness. How could someone like her put up with such a thing? Su Qingseng shook her head. I'm not putting up with it. I'm just a doctor. A doctor couldn't just watch a patient die. A doctor couldn't just watch a patient's condition worsen in front of him. After all, Li Hong was in the hospital. If they didn't take care of her, the media and keyboard warriors would say that they were cold-blooded and heartless doctors. Besides, Su Qingseng believed that when Li Hong found out what Lin Gang had done, she would suffer a greater blow. By then, Li Hong might not be able to take it. At that thought, Su Qingseng didn't want to argue with Li Hong anymore. What would happen if Li Hong found out? Su Qingseng didn't care, but she could guess that it wouldn't end well. Chapter 538. Tianyu Group President's Office. Su Qingseng had returned to work, so Hua Jinyao didn't have to worry about her every day. This time, the matter was settled, and the Livestream reporter made a scene online. It was likely that no one would make a move against Su Qingsang for a long time. Of course, he did not forget to make some other arrangements. He didn't believe that anyone would dare to offend Su Qingsang. Yang Wenchang told him that when Fei had booked a plane ticket for tomorrow night, he arranged for a doctor and a nurse to accompany her. With someone taking care of her, she believed that she and her son would be able to fly to the United States safely. You've handled this matter well. Hua Jinyao was very sure of Yang Wenchang's abilities. That Wen Fei was indeed a good choice, Wen Fei played a big part in solving Lin Gang's problem so quickly. Of course, the follow-up matters were handled well. After all, Wen Fei had helped them. Even if she had received money, it was still a favor. Yang Wenchang did more than that. Wen Fei's doctor was not a top-notch specialist. After consulting with Hua Jinyao, Yang Wenchang found a more famous specialist with a higher success rate for her surgery. For Hua Jinyao, these were all trivial matters. A few phone calls could solve it. Anyway, thank you for your hard work. Hua Jinyao didn't have anything else to give him. I've been busy lately. After you're done with this, I'll allow you to take a vacation. Most of the time, Yang Wenchang was busier than him. If he didn't rest, Yang Wenchang couldn't either. Even if he rested, Yang Wenchang couldn't rest. It's my duty to share the boss's worries. Yang Wenchang smiled and said, but if you're willing to let me rest longer, I'll be even happier. Hua Jinyao didn't object. That's fine, but you have to train you and the others first. When I can replace you, you can take a vacation. Indefinite leave. Then President Hua, I won't let you go. Yang Wenchang joked with Hua Jinyao. He had been working for Hua Jinyao ever since he graduated from university. The two of them had worked together for many years, and their relationship was extraordinary. He wouldn't take such a joke to heart. After the joke was over, it was time to get down to business. Yang Wenchang reported that he had sent someone to keep an eye on Xiao Hong. However, there were still no clues and no results. Just as she was about to ask Hua Jinyao if he still wanted to keep an eye on them, Ding Qing knocked on the door and came in. She said that she wanted to talk to Hua Jinyao about something. She had an urgent document sent by the planning department. That person knew that the document was 3 days late, so he didn't dare to come to Hua Jinyao. So he asked Ding Qing to deliver it to him. Hua Jinyao took the document from her hand and casually flipped through it. The people from the planning department are really smart. Knowing that I'm not satisfied with the proposal, they came to you and asked you to deliver it to me? Throwing the document on the desk, Hua Jinyao raised his head and looked at Ding Qing. Miss Ding, I admit that you are capable, and I agree with your ambition. However, this kind of good deed doesn't seem to be your style. They're all colleagues. Ding Qing smiled brightly. She knew that the proposal didn't pass the test again, so she didn't say anything. She picked it up and said, I'll help you if I can. You won't mind, right? Hua Jinyao didn't answer her question. He looked at Yang Wenchang and said, I agree with what you just said. There's no need to keep an eye on Xiao Hong anymore. President Hua, we've been watching it for more than a week. If he wanted to expose himself, he would have done it long ago. It's just a waste of time and energy to keep watching him. Yes. Yang Wenchang nodded. Hua Jinyao glanced at Ding Qing and asked, anything else? No. Ding Qing took the document and walked out of the office. The moment she opened the door, she heard Hua Jinyao say, I have another thing that I need you to do. It's much more important than Xiao Hong's. She frowned. She almost wanted to stay and listen to the whole thing. After all, she didn't want to offend Hua Jinyao. However, what could be more important than Xiao Hong's? Ding Qing walked out. Hua Jinyao signaled Yang Wenchang with his eyes to check if the office door was closed. Yang Wenchang didn't understand. He walked up to check and stood back in front of the desk. President Hua, what is it? Hua Jinyao looked at Yang Wenchang and suddenly put on a serious face. Keep an eye on Xiao Hong and send more people than before. Keep an eye on him from all directions. If you can have his phone tapped, I believe we'll get the results soon. President Hua. Yang Wenchang didn't understand what Hua Jinyao meant. Hua Jinyao didn't say that. Yang Wenchang was a smart man. Ding Qing was in the office just now. Did Hua Jinyao say that on purpose? President Hua, are you suspecting Ding Qing? Yang Wenchang was shocked. Hua Jinyao narrowed his eyes. He subconsciously tapped his fingers on the desk. Hua Jinyao didn't want to use that word. Just do as I say. Also check on Ding Qing. It's best if you can find out who she's been in contact with. Yes. Yang Wenchang hadn't found anything wrong with Ding Qing in the past few days. But since Hua Jinyao said so, there must be something wrong. After Yang Wenchang left, Hua Jinyao looked at the document that Ding Qing had just given him. He couldn't deny that Ding Qing was good at her job. However, no matter how good she was, if she wasn't loyal, he wouldn't want her. It didn't matter though. He would soon find out whether she was a human or a ghost. Su Qingsang was in a good mood. The problem was solved. Su Yusin and Shi Mingwan both called to ask about her. It was a big deal, but it was solved quickly. Su Yusin was relieved when he heard that it was Hua Jinyao who helped. After the incident, the leaders of the hospital all came to the gynecology and obstetrics department to visit her, saying that she had been wronged. They also praised Su Qingsang at the hospital meeting, saying that she didn't care about personal gains and losses. They said that she didn't care about the past, and treated the patients' families like family members. Su Qingsang knew that the hospital didn't want to offend anyone. She had just been in the hospital for a short time. How could she deserve that kind of praise? She didn't take it to heart. She continued to work and perform surgeries. Every day she was busy. She was busy, but Hua Jinyao wasn't idle either. She noticed that he was even busier than before. A few more days passed. Li Hong's wound was almost healed. She could leave the hospital. However, there was a problem. Lin Gang didn't show up. No one paid the rest of the bill for Li Hong, so she had to stay in the hospital. She kept calling Lin Gang and asked her neighbor to tell Lin Gang about her. Lin Gang finally showed up. He paid the hospital bill, left 50,000 yuan, and ran away after saying that he wanted a divorce. Li Hong screamed in pain. She held Lin Gang's hand tightly and didn't want to let go. She couldn't believe that Lin Gang would be so heartless as to leave her and her daughter behind. Lin Gang, you will die a horrible death. You encouraged me to blackmail you. And it was also your idea to slander Dr. Su. How dare you abandon me? You're not a human being. Li Hong made a scene in the hospital, but she didn't expect that Lin Gang would abandon them. It wasn't because of what had happened before. When Fei was a smart girl, she didn't want Lin Gang to pester her, so she comforted him a few days ago. Before she left, she told him that she was going abroad for a business trip. Lin Gang was dreaming, so he didn't think too much about it. He asked when Fei and found out that she would be away for more than a week. His eyes were full of disappointment. When Fei was afraid that he wouldn't fall for it, so she gave him the key card to the presidential suite and told him that he could stay there at night if he wanted. For Lin Gang, it was as if he had won the lottery. He stayed in a 5-star suite in a luxurious hotel and enjoyed the luxurious meals served by the hotel every day. How could he care about Li Hong's life when he was so ambitious? The money that the car owner had given him was used to pay for the hospital fees. The 100,000 yuan he had was given to him by the person who asked him to slander Su Qingsang. He didn't want to give Li Hong a single cent of the 100,000 yuan. However, he realized that he was going to have a hotel soon. He was generous enough to give Li Hong 50,000 yuan. He considered it a divorce. Li Hong had just given birth to a baby. Even though her wounds had healed, she was still very weak. She had been beaten and had no one to take care of her. Now Li Gang wanted to divorce her. How could she stand it? She didn't want to leave the hospital anymore. She made a scene in the hospital and refused to leave. Later, the security guards came and called the police. Finally, Li Hong was persuaded to leave. She took the 50,000 yuan, held her daughter, and left the hospital alone. Su Qingsang didn't pay much attention to it. For one thing, she had become a celebrity in Rong City after what had happened to Lin Gang. Many people came to see her for treatment. The hospital even opened the back door and let her become a specialist. She had a lot more patients than before, so she was busier than ever. For another thing, she couldn't feel any sympathy for Li Hong. Lin Gang had asked her to blackmail him, which was his fault. However, Li Hong knew that it was wrong and dangerous, But she still went. She had her own problems. She had only herself to blame for what had happened. She couldn't blame anyone else. On the other hand, Yang Wenchang, who had been lying low for a while, finally got the information that Hu Jinyao wanted. President Hua, Lin Gang was kicked out of the hotel today. Yang Wenchang reported to Hu Jinyao about what had happened. He got off lightly. He had stayed in the hotel for a few days and enjoyed himself for a few days. Yang Wenchang felt a little guilty. It was too easy for a man like him to get all that. You don't understand, do you? Hu Jinyao smiled. The more you do that, the crueler it will be for him. If a man had never gotten something, he would never think about it. However, once he got it, he would lose it. That feeling was more painful than if he had never gotten it. A few days ago, when Fei told Lin Gang that she was going on a business trip and asked him to stay in the presidential suite, he believed her. Not only did he believe her, he even went to divorce Li Hong. Now that he and Li Hong had divorced, it was time to close the net. Li Hong wasn't easy to deal with. Lin Gang wanted to divorce her, so she asked him to give her the house and the money. Otherwise, she wouldn't leave. She said that she had to take care of the baby, eat and drink, and pay for the baby's milk powder. Lin Gang was still dreaming of marrying a rich woman. After thinking about it, he didn't make it difficult for her. He gave Li Hong the money and the house. After that, the staff at the hotel got the news as well. When Lin Gang went back to the hotel, he was told that the presidential suite had expired. The staff asked him if he wanted to renew it. Lin Gang was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe his ears, so he kept arguing with the staff at the hotel. He said that the hotel belonged to Wen Fei, and that Wen Fei was his friend. Why did he have to pay? The staff of the hotel were confused. Who is Wen Fei? The hotel was booked by someone else, and the name wasn't Wen Fei's. Wen Fei wasn't the owner of the hotel either. When Wen Fei came that day, did you call her President Wen? We have a general manager or a boss here, and they all call him boss. Lin Gang wasn't convinced by the staff's explanation, so he started arguing. In the end, even the police came. After a while, he realized that he had been tricked. Just like Li Hong, he cursed loudly in the hotel. However, he was taken away by the hotel's security and the police. Now Lin Gang was crazy. He was looking for Wen Fei everywhere. Hu Jinyao truly thought that Lin Gang was ridiculous. You did a good job. We'll take it as a kindness that he took advantage of us. Yang Wenchang nodded. That was the truth. Lin Gang still couldn't believe that he had been tricked. Wen Fei was his classmate. Lin Gang went crazy and said that the hotel staff must have thought that Wen Fei, a single woman, was easy to bully. That was why the hotel staff tried to murder her. Let's not talk about Lin Gang anymore. He can't do anything now anyway. Yang Wenchang had found some important information today. President Hua, I found something about Ding Qing that you asked me to keep an eye on. Hu Jinyao narrowed his eyes. Yang Wenchang took out the file and put it in front of Hu Jinyao. Last night, Ding Qing's people ran into the people who were keeping an eye on Xiao Hong. Hu Jinyao's eyes fell on the photo. Ding Qing and Xiao Hong met in a bar again. It was a crowded bar, which made it convenient for them to meet each other, and for Yang Wenchang's people to take photos. She's alert. After you said that, she didn't go to Xiao Hong right away. Instead, she went there 3 days later. Hu Jinyao stayed silent, watching Ding Qing and Xiao Hong meet. One of them took out his phone. Yang Wenchang saw the photo as well. We've checked it. There's an extra 10 million in Xiao Hong's account. Hu Jinyao curled up the corner of his lips. 10 million? That's a good price. Compared to the 2 million they gave him, 10 million was a lot. However, compared to the value of the file, 10 million was nothing. Who's behind Ding Qing? Have you found out? Not yet. We didn't find Ding Qing's phone records. She's using other means of communication. A sharp light flashed across Hu Jinyao's eyes. Secretary Ding's phone is new, isn't it? If she accidentally drops her phone or drops it into the water, she'll have to get a new one, right? Yang Wenchang nodded. I see. Chapter 539. It wasn't just about Xiao Hong. He had every reason to believe that the same person was behind Su Qingsong's death. It could also be done by two groups of people. One group was against him, and the other was against Su Qingsang? However, Qingsang hadn't offended anyone. If the other party had really attacked her, it was mostly because of him. No matter which one it was, he did not intend to let these people continue to be complacent. When Hua Jinyao got home, Su Qingsang had just put away the clothes and put them in the room. Auntie Yu and the hourly helper were in charge of cleaning the house. But most of the time, Su Qingsang still liked to do it herself. He liked to see her busying herself under the light, and he liked to see her working hard for this family. For example, a bouquet of flowers that he bought after work, or an aromatherapy night light that could help him sleep. Little by little, she left her mark in every corner of the house. When Su Qingsang was putting a coat in the closet, she turned around and saw Hua Jinyao. "You're back." She walked in his direction. She had already taken a shower, and there was a faint fragrance on her body. Hugging her in his arms, his whole body relaxed. "Why don't you leave it here and let Auntie Yu collect it tomorrow? I saw the weather forecast that it's going to rain. Besides, why do we have to wait for Auntie Yu for such a small matter? She used to do these things herself." There was no reason for him to turn into a lazy person who did not know how to distinguish the 5 grains after getting married. As she spoke, she heard the sound of rain hitting the glass outside. She turned to look at Hua Jinyao and said, "Look, it's really raining. Fortunately, you came back early." Hua Jinyao drove to and fro, so it didn't matter to him whether it rained or not. But if it was raining, the road would be slippery. In addition, it was already night time. Su Qingsang felt that she was really lucky. Hua Jinyao liked this side of her. Even the smallest things could make her happy. The more he spent time with her, the more he realized that Su Qingsang was a very simple person. She didn't like complicated people and things. However, because she was married to him, she would always encounter more complicated people and things. He remembered that he had asked Yang Wenchang to keep an eye on Ding Qing for the past few days, but Ding Qing hadn't contacted the person behind her. Yesterday, he even used a trick like monitoring the phone. If he could, he didn't want to do this. Like Su Qingsang, he didn't like this kind of thing. However, like Su Qingsang, he couldn't avoid it. "What's wrong?" Su Qingsang sensed that Hua Jinyao wasn't in a good mood. "Qingsang." Hua Jinyao held her hand and looked into her eyes very seriously. You've been in Rong City for so long. Are you used to it?" With so many people in the Hua family, there were many things they had to face. Back in Lin City, the only person who could make things difficult for Su Qingsang was Su Peixian. At the end of the day, she was still the daughter of the Su family. Su Peixian was just playing around, but it was different here. Everyone here was not what they appeared to be on the surface. Occasionally, he would wonder if Su Qingsang would feel tired too. "I'm used to it." Su Qingsang didn't understand why he would ask such a question. She really didn't feel uncomfortable about it. The only drawback was that he couldn't meet Shi Mingwan often. In addition to Zhua Hongqian, there were quite a few of her classmates in Lin City Hospital. It felt good to do research and research together. But here, apart from doing research and staying in the hospital, she could only go to the Hua family. It was indeed a little boring, but it didn't matter. Recently, her relationship with her colleagues in the hospital was slowly improving. She wouldn't be bored forever. Really, why didn't Hua Jinyao believe it? So what if I'm really not used to it? Can I go back to Lin City? Hua Jinyao couldn't answer this. The headquarters of Tianyu Group was in Rong City. Even if he returned to Lin City, he wouldn't stay for long. And since he couldn't leave, Su Qingsang naturally had to stay here. For the first time, Hua Jinyao realized that he wasn't so omnipotent. He had weaknesses and responsibilities. He didn't have the right to be willful. Hua Jinyao hugged Su Qingsang tightly in his arms, as if he was afraid of losing her. He hugged her tightly. This time, Su Qingsang guessed what he was thinking. She put her hands on his back and patted him gently. Su Qingsang looked up at him and said, "Hua Jinyao, I'm not uncomfortable. It's quite good." Although the winter here was very cold, there was heating. Although there were very few acquaintances here, she would slowly get to know them. As long as the person beside her was him, those problems wouldn't be problems. She would be good and try her best to live here. For him and for herself. Hua Jinyao looked at her fair, almost transparent face under the light. He lowered his head and gently kissed her lips. The words thank you didn't come out. He didn't need to say it. Peijian, it's raining outside. Where are you going? Xiang Kaiping looked at the weather outside and found that Su Peijian had changed her clothes and was holding her bag, looking like she was going out to see a friend. Su Peijian didn't answer Xiang Kaiping's words very patiently. It wasn't that Xiang Kaiping didn't understand, but now she was only worried about her daughter's safety. But it's going to rain later. What friend can't you see tomorrow? Mom, my friend from Lin City. He flew all the way from Lin City to see me. I can't not go, can I? Although Xiang Kaiping gave her the supermarket, she still kept the shares for herself. Su Peijian patiently answered Xiang Kaiping's question. What friend? You won't know him even if I tell you. Su Peijian saw the hesitation on Xiang Kaiping's face. She stepped forward and patted Xiang Kaiping on the shoulder. All right, I promise you. I'll be back soon after I see him. Mom, you should sleep early too. Don't wait for me. But, I'm leaving. Su Peijian waved and walked out. Xiang Kaiping stood at the door of the villa. The door was not closed yet. The cold air outside blew in, and she was so cold that she shrank. She closed the door and stood by the window, watching Su Peijian start the car and drive away. Actually, it wasn't just today. After coming to Rong City, she found that Su Peijian liked to go out and play. Not only during the day, but also at night. She didn't seem to want to stay in this house, and she didn't want to accompany her. Xiang Kaiping asked where she went several times, but Su Peijian was unwilling to answer every time, or she would say a few words casually. She asked too many times, and Su Peijian said that she didn't know even if she told her. Xiang Kaiping couldn't tell how she felt, but she knew that this wasn't the mother-daughter relationship that she had imagined. She still remembered that when she mistook Su Qingsang for her, Su Qingsang was very good to her. Every time she got off work, she would rush back. She would talk to her and accompany her to relieve her boredom. She would take her shopping everywhere and buy things for her. She wasn't like Su Peijian, who seemed to be a different person after she came. She was impatient with herself and didn't want to talk about what she had encountered outside. Last time, because the supermarket staff told her about her whereabouts, Su Peijian lost her temper. She said that she wasn't a prisoner, not her prisoner. She told her not to watch her every day, saying that it would make her feel pressured. After being scolded like that, Xiang Kaiping didn't dare to care about her anymore. She couldn't hide the pain in her heart. She didn't want to care about her. She just cared about her. Why did she say that to her? How did she respond at that time? She tried so hard to explain to Su Peijian that she almost cried. Although Su Peijian believed her, she didn't let her care about her anymore. Not only that, she also used the excuse that the staff was not loyal to her and replaced them. She knew that the people who were still working now were all old employees of the company, but she still let Su Peijian make a scene. After that incident, the group of old employees didn't dare to talk to her again when she went to the supermarket. She wanted to ask Su Peijian how she was doing every day, and if there was anything she couldn't solve in the business. Because those employees were afraid of being fired, no one dared to tell her about Su Peijian. She only found out later that Su Peijian went to the supermarket. She didn't treat the supermarket as her home like she used to, and she was busy from morning to night. More importantly, Su Peijian was often not there, and she didn't know where she went. She asked again later, and Su Peijian's temper was even worse than before. The more she said that she was just worried, the more Su Peijian was disgusted. I'm such a big person and I have hands and feet. How can I be lost? Su Peijian's words made her speechless. Xiang Kaiping knew that her daughter didn't have the time they spent together for more than 20 years, and she couldn't be close to her. Naturally, she wouldn't listen to her. However, knowing was one thing, and accepting was another. That was her daughter after all. Xiang Kaiping looked out of the window. The rain was getting heavier, and the disappointment in her heart was getting more and more obvious. She couldn't help but think that if Su Qingsang was really her daughter, she suppressed the thought as soon as it came to her. She couldn't think about it. No matter how inconsiderate Su Peijian was, she was her own daughter. She was her own daughter. She hated that Li Qianxue. She took her man and her daughter away. She raised her daughter to be what she was today. Speaking of which, it wasn't Su Peijian's fault. It was Su Qinghui and Li Qianshua's fault. Xiang Kaiping thought that she should treat Su Peijian better, a little better. Maybe Su Peijian would be moved by it. Yang Wenchang looked at Hu Jinyao, and his face was very dark. It had been almost 10 days since Hu Jinyao asked Yang Wenchang to investigate Ding Qing. Yang Wenchang was very patient, and Ding Qing seemed to be very patient too. Nothing unusual had happened to her these days. Not only was her behavior normal, but even her phone calls were normal. However, that only lasted until last night. Last night, Yang Wenchang's men listened in on Ding Qing's phone calls as usual. Chapter 540. Su Peijian sat in the private room. On her left sat the Hu brothers, Hu Yifan and Hu Yang. On the right were a few children, who got along well with the Hu brothers. Speaking of which, it was quite interesting. Hu Jinyao had a few childhood friends, including Li Junxing, Su Chonglong, Wan Xianying, Cheng Xianyan and Tang Mohan. His circle was almost fixed. If others couldn't enter, they wouldn't easily bring outsiders into their circle. However, whether it was the Li clan, Wang clan, Tang clan, or Su clan, it was impossible for them to only have one brother. As for the cousins of these families, they couldn't get into Hu Jinyao's circle, so they naturally hung out with Hu Yifan and Hu Yang. Other than them, there was also He Xiankai. Ever since he was humiliated by Hu Jinyao, he thought of a way to hook up with Hu Yifan. It was true that Hu Jinyao could be proud now, but who knew how long he could be proud? As for the rest of the people, they were just following the crowd and watching the show. If they really made a move on the Hu family, they would probably be scared out of their wits. Su Peijian raised the cup in front of her and gently took a sip. Her every movement had the air of a young lady from a wealthy family. She smiled faintly, her facial features beautiful, but there was a hint of grievance and melancholy in her eyes. Speaking of which, it was true that Su Peijian was spoiled and willful, but she had changed in the past few months. She was completely different from the spoiled young lady she used to be. She had the magnanimity of a rich young lady, who had been carefully cultivated by Li Qianshua. But there was also a light worry in her eyes that was different from that of ordinary rich young ladies. A few months ago, Su Peijian had gotten to know He Xingxian, so she had gotten to know that employee of the Tianyu group. She had only gotten to know Hu Jinyao, but she had accidentally discovered something interesting about the Hu family. For example, Hu Jinyao was the eldest son, but he was not favored in the Hu family. For example, Hu Jinyao's position as the CEO was not as stable as others thought. She also asked about other things. The more she found out, the more interesting she found it. She was glad that she had come to Rong City. This place was much more fun than Lin City. Peijian, won't you have a drink with me? Hu Yifan looked at Su Peijian with a hint of amusement in his eyes. It was undeniable that after interacting with this woman a few times, he felt that she was quite to his taste. What? Su Peijian raised her eyebrows and turned to look at Hu Yifan. Mr. Hua, are you treating me as an escort? How could this be? Hu Yifan stepped forward and put his arm around her waist. I admire you and want to have a drink with you. How's that? Good reason. Su Peijian smiled, raised her glass, and handed it to Hu Yifan. Well, here's to your good taste. Hu Yifan smiled and clinked glasses with Su Peijian. I find that I admire you more and more. Thank you. Su Peijian clinked glasses with him, and downed the wine in one gulp. The corners of his lips curled up with a hint of smugness. Look, her charm was still there. Only blind people like Qiu Yanba and Hu Jinyao would stare at Su Qingsang. Hu Yifan was much more perceptive than the others. Mr. Hua, how about we play something exciting? As soon as she said that, not only Hu Yifan, but also Hu Yang and the others stared at Su Peijian. Su Peijian enjoyed their gazes very much. Hu Yifan stared at her face and tightened his arm around her waist. How exciting! Let's make a bet. What bet? I bet that you will fall in love with me in a month. As Su Peijian spoke, she gently poked Hu Yifan's chest. She knew which angle of her was the most beautiful and seductive. She had practiced many times in front of the mirror at home for today. Hu Yifan smiled, and the others followed suit. Su Peijian stood up slightly, held Hui Yifan's hand, and sat down on his lap. What, you don't dare to bet? There's no need to bet. Hui Yifan held her hand and kissed it on his lips. I'm falling in love with you now. Really? Of course. Hui Yifan nodded. I'm willing to admit defeat. What do you want? Su Peijian shook her head. Mr. Hua, you don't have to coax me. You didn't fall in love with me. You're not me. How would you know? Of course I know. A man's eyes will be different when he looks at the woman he loves. As Su Peijian spoke, she reached out and drew a circle on Hui Yifan's chest. I don't mind waiting, because I have confidence. In a month, you will definitely fall in love with me. Hui Yifan looked at the beauty in Su Peijian's eyes, and couldn't help but want to kiss her. However, Su Peijian stood up at this moment and quickly left his arms. Mr. Hua, I think it's better for us to maintain a sense of mystery before you fall in love with me. As she spoke, she picked up her bag on the sofa. Mr. Hua, Mr. He, young Master Wan, young Master Tang, I have to go home. Excuse me. I'll see you next time. Waving her hand, she left in her high heels. Hui Yifan almost got up to chase after her. Hua Yang looked at his brother and narrowed his eyes. Brother, do you really like her that much? It's exciting, isn't it? Why do I feel like she's not a good person? Hua Yang wasn't stupid. How many people in this circle were stupid? It was obvious that Su Peijian wasn't from a good background. She suddenly appeared and inexplicably entered their circle, after only a few interactions. It felt like they knew every step of the way. But now that he looked back, he felt that it was unexpected. Not a good person. Hui Yifan smiled and turned to look at him. Are you a good person, brother? Hui Yifan picked up the wine in front of him and took a sip. Don't worry. Of course, I know she's not a good person. He could even guess that Su Peijian had an ulterior motive. But so what? The more beautiful a woman was, the more sense of accomplishment he would feel when he conquered her. He couldn't wait to see Su Peijian submit to him. The atmosphere in the office was still very tense. Yang Wenchang looked at Hu Jinyao with a complicated expression. Originally, when Ding Qing made a move, he would naturally be able to find something on her. But when Yang Wenchang found it and recorded it, he suddenly didn't want to show it to Hu Jinyao, who was in contact with Ding Qing. Yang Wenchang stood there without moving. He didn't know how to give the investigation report to Hu Jinyao. This was the most complicated thing he had ever been since he started working for Hu Jinyao. President Hua. Hu Jinyao raised his head to look at him. Yang Wenchang's lips were pressed together tightly. He didn't look well. When he met Hu Jinyao's sharp gaze, a rare feeling of guilt welled up in him. He had been working for Hu Jinyao for many years. It had been 7 or 8 years since he graduated. During this time, he got married and had children. He grew up in a happy family. His family was simple, and he met his wife in college and then married her. He used to envy Hu Jinyao, who was born into a wealthy family. He was destined to be a superior person from the moment he was born. Such a person was undoubtedly a winner in life and had a smooth life. But after working for Hu Jinyao for a long time, he realized that it wasn't like that. Being rich didn't make one happy, nor did having a high social status. Ever since Hu Jinyao took over as the president of Tianyu Group, he had been unhappy more than happy. President Hua, since Ding Qing is unreliable, let's fire her. It doesn't matter who she contacts. As long as she doesn't work for this company, we won't be able to cause further losses. Hu Jinyao narrowed his eyes, watching his usually calm assistant lose control, which was rare. Give me the investigation report. President Hua, give it to me. Hu Jinyao stared at him, as if his eyes could pierce through him. Yang Wenchang lowered his head and said, President Hua, I've sent it to your mailbox. Yang Wenchang's tone was a little strange. He seemed to be avoiding something, but at the same time, he seemed to have some scruples. Hu Jinyao didn't look at him again. He directly clicked on the document. There were 2 audio files attached to the document. He clicked on the recording of Ding Qing's contact with someone. Yang Wenchang took a step forward. He seemed to want to stop Hu Jinyao, but then he stepped back. The audio started playing. The voice coming from the recording was very familiar. Hu Jinyao didn't need to read the file to know whose voice it was. He had heard too many voices, ever since he was a kid. This voice, his expression didn't change at all. He calmly listened to the first recording, then clicked on the second one. There were 2 recordings in total. Both recordings had the same voice, and the content was similar. Under the 2 files, there was a written explanation written by Yang Wenchang. He looked at Hu Jingyao with pity in his eyes. Hu Jingyao remained calm. He raised his eyes to look at Yang Wenchang, with no emotion in his eyes. You go out first. President Hua. I said go out. Yang Wenchang lowered his eyes, then turned around and left. After he left, Hu Jingyao picked up the laptop and threw it against the wall. The ultra-thin laptop hit the wall at this time, and the excessive impact caused the laptop to be smashed into pieces. Hu Jingyao felt that it wasn't enough. He threw all the files, folders, paperweights and pens on the table. When there was nothing left to throw, he grabbed a photo album on the table and was about to throw it out. His eyes stopped when he saw Su Qingsong's photo. He put the photo frame down bit by bit, then put it back on the table. He looked at the photo, at Su Qingsong's face with a faint smile on her face as she looked at the camera. He closed his eyes and weakly collapsed on the office chair. Jingyao? She had a night shift that day, so she came back a little late. She walked in and found that the dishes on the dining table were still there. She called Hu Jingyao, but he didn't answer. She called Ms. Yu, who said that Hu Jingyao didn't come home for dinner. She went back to her room and found that Hu Jingyao was taking a shower in the bathroom. Chapter 541. She called out again, but Hu Jingyao didn't seem to hear her. Su Qingsang was a little worried. She took a few steps forward and was about to pat him on the back. However, she found that Hu Jingyao was showering in cold water. Cold showers in this weather? Jingyao, what are you doing? Was he crazy? She hurriedly turned off the water and looked at Hu Jingyao, only to find that he didn't seem to notice her coming in. His skin had turned red. His body was cold to the touch. He didn't know how long he had been charging. Su Qingsang wrapped Hu Jingyao in a towel. Hu Jingyao, are you alright? Hu Jingyao was not normal. Hu Jingyao seemed to have finally seen her. He suddenly reached out and hugged her. He hugged her tightly and forcefully. Su Qingsang was suffocated by his embrace. She didn't try to push him away. His body was trembling. She could feel that Hu Jingyao was in a bad mood. Jingyao. She called his name softly, but Hu Jingyao didn't respond at all. He just hugged her tightly. He was too strong and she couldn't break free at all. She could only let him hug her. She wanted to call him, to say something, but no words came out. In the end, she was afraid that he would catch a cold. His body was so cold that she could feel it even through his clothes. She tried to hug him back, tried to get him to go back to his room. Hu Jingyao, can we go back to the room? Let me dry your hair for you. She still wanted to blow on him. She also wanted him to quickly cover himself with the blanket. Hu Jingyao remained silent. He pressed Su Qingsong's head against his chest. She had to pat his back gently. Hu Jingyao, your hair is wet. Let's go back to the room. I'll dry it for you, okay? Hu Jingyao lowered his head to look at her, and finally followed her back to her room. He did not speak, and she did not ask him. She quietly wiped his body clean and dried his hair. He was really cold. In the past, she always liked to hug him, thinking that he was the kind of big warm woman. She felt her eyes were a little sore. She dried his hair as fast as she could and laid him down on the bed. She covered his body with the blanket, but he still didn't speak. He just lay there without moving. Su Qingsang had never seen him like this. She had a lot to ask and a lot to say, but now she couldn't say a single word. Jingyao, what happened? She looked at him for an answer. Hu Jingyao was still lying there without moving. Su Qingsang waited for a long time, but he didn't say anything. She couldn't wait anymore. She stood up and wanted to take a shower. She was soaked with water after being hit by Hu Jingyao. As soon as she got up, Hu Jingyao grabbed her wrist. He pulled her into his arms forcefully. She landed on his chest and looked up at him. For the first time, Hu Jingyao saw nothing. His eyes were empty, and his gaze was extremely vacant. Her heart felt like it was being pricked by needles. She couldn't help but reach out her hand to cover the pair of eyes. Hua Jingyao held her hand and hugged her tightly again. He lowered his head and buried his face in the crook of her neck. Su Qingseng thought that he wanted that, but he didn't. He just held her like this. It was a very strange and uncomfortable position. She was half lying on her stomach and felt very tired. Just as she was about to ask him to let go of her, she suddenly felt something wet on her neck. The warm touch made Su Qingseng's body stiffen. Was that tears? She wanted to raise her head and look at him, but he wouldn't let her. She felt that the wetness on her neck was getting bigger and bigger. Her heart began to tremble. She had seen Hua Jingyao many times. Rascally, wise, fierce, sharp-tongued, domineering, and strong when he protected her behind him. But she had never seen Hua Jingyao cry. She couldn't move at all. She could only feel that the wetness on her neck was getting bigger and bigger. Hua, I'm in so much pain. He said those 3 words in a low voice, almost in a gasp, and it rang in Su Qingseng's ears. The 3 simple words made Su Qingseng's heart tremble. Hua Jingyao, I'm in so much pain. Hua Jingyao closed his eyes tightly, but he couldn't stop the tears from falling. Those emotions were too difficult to vent. Even if he smashed the office, he couldn't ease it at all. The pain from the accumulated problems that had existed for a long time had reached its peak at this moment. When he saw those documents and heard the 2 recordings today, he couldn't control himself at all. At first he was just confused, angry. But when the anger reached its peak, it turned into pain. It was a pain that began to spread from his heart, from his blood, and bit by bit, it permeated his entire body. It was so fierce that he couldn't resist it at all. It was really painful, very painful. My heart hurt so much. Hua Jingyao. Su Qingseng hugged him tightly. It's okay, it's okay. Hua Jingyao wanted to shake his head. It couldn't be okay. It couldn't be okay. How could it be okay? The tears had stopped flowing, but he still couldn't suppress the pain in his heart. He hugged Su Qingseng tightly, almost as if he wanted to rub her into his body. Hua Jingyao hugged her tightly and didn't let go, letting his emotions vent at that moment. Su Qingseng didn't dare to move at all. She kept patting Hua Jingyao's shoulder, gently again and again. She rarely comforted people, so she could only think of such a clumsy way to calm him down. Hua Jingyao's hands were still wrapped around her, very hard and very tight. She didn't think of breaking free. Just like that, she used this very strange and uncomfortable position, half lying on his body. She kept patting his back to calm him down. After an unknown period of time, Su Qingseng's body was almost numb. The grip on her back finally loosened. Su Qingseng took a long time to recover. She got up and found that Hua Jingyao had fallen asleep. His face was already full of tears. It was as if what she had just seen was an illusion. Su Qingseng leaned closer to see clearly, but she found that Hua Jingyao really didn't have any tears. He was used to hiding his emotions. Even now he wouldn't let her see it. She stared at Hua Jingyao's face for a long time. His deep facial features were very stiff. Even though he was asleep, his entire body was tense. The expression on his face didn't ease because he had fallen asleep. He only looked more and more serious. Su Qingseng tried to reach out to smooth his tightly knitted brows, but it was useless. After a while he frowned again. She tried several times but failed. Hua Jingyao's brows were tightly knitted. Chapter 542. Su Qingseng was very close, but she couldn't hear what Hua Jingyao was saying. She couldn't help but lean closer. She still couldn't hear anything clearly. She vaguely seemed to be asking something. But when she wanted to listen again, Hua Jingyao fell asleep again. She didn't hear Hua Jingyao speak again until Su Qingseng took a shower and lay down beside Hua Jingyao. He didn't even talk in his sleep. Su Qingseng slept next to him. She gently snuggled up to him. His body wasn't as cold as before. However, she still felt that the temperature was much lower than usual. Su Qingseng couldn't help but hug him. He didn't put on his clothes when he came out of the bathroom. At this moment, she didn't have any romantic thoughts in her mind at all. There were only his faint tears that flowed into her heart, and his trembling hands when he hugged her. She looked up at Hua Jingyao. He looked paler than usual. His facial features could really feel that even if he was sleeping at this moment, he wouldn't be able to sleep well. Su Qingseng's heart ached. She didn't understand what had happened. In the end, she could only hug Hu Jiniao tighter, trying to give him some strength and comfort. In the middle of the night, Su Qingsang was woken up by the heat. She felt extremely uncomfortable and wanted to lift the blanket, but she found that it wasn't the blanket that made her feel hot, but Hu Jiniao. His body was boiling hot, and the temperature made Su Qingsang wake up almost instantly. Jiniao. She gently pushed Hu Jiniao's body, but there was no reaction. Not only was his body temperature very high, but the temperature of his forehead was even higher. Even his breath was a little heavy. Su Qingsang quickly got up. Looking at Hu Jiniao, he must have caught a cold in the rain. She hurriedly got up and went to the living room to get the medicine box. She found the commonly used cold medicine and planned to feed it to Hu Jiniao. But Hu Jiniao didn't cooperate at all. He couldn't swallow the medicine at all. In the end, Su Qingsang could only force the medicine into Hu Jiniao's mouth, drink some water, and feed it to him mouth to mouth. She didn't care if she would be infected by Hu Jiniao at this moment. She even fed him the medicine, but Hu Jiniao's body was still very hot. Su Qingsang was a doctor, so of course she knew how to deal with it. She got some water and began to cool Hu Jiniao down. She wiped Hu Jiniao's body over and over again, trying to cool down his body temperature. Su Qingsang had been busy for more than an hour before Hu Jiniao's body temperature was no longer as high as before. His fever was gone, and she was exhausted. June went back to sleep on the bed, but he couldn't fall asleep no matter what. She looked at Hu Jiniao and was sure that something unusual must have happened, but she didn't know what it was. She had been taking care of Hu Jiniao for most of the night and was tired herself. She stared at Hu Jiniao for a long time before falling asleep again. What Su Qingsang didn't expect was that the harder it was for a person to get sick, the more likely it was to get sick. She had already given Hu Jiniao some medicine yesterday, but when she got up this morning, she found that Hu Jiniao's fever was still there. Not only did it not recede, but it was even more serious than yesterday. Shocked, she found the medicine and fed it to Hu Jiniao. Then, she tried to lower his body temperature again, but it was no use. Hu Jiniao's fever was getting worse. Not only did he have a high fever, but he also said that he had something to say. Hu Jiniao. Hu Jiniao. Su Qingsang called Hu Jiniao a few times, but he didn't respond at all. Su Qingsang couldn't go to work like this. She called Sun Huiya to ask for leave. Her tone was too urgent, so Sun Huiya agreed without asking further. After hanging up the phone, Su Qingsang saw that he didn't look good. Hu Jiniao's fever didn't go down, so she could only give him an 4. Hu Jiniao. Su Qingsang approached him and whispered in his ear. Get up. I'll take you to the hospital, okay? Hu Jiniao didn't respond. Su Qingsang wanted to help him up, but she couldn't do it alone. Calling an ambulance seemed to be making a mountain out of a molehill. She thought about it and decided to go to the hospital. She covered Hu Jiniao with the blanket and said, I'll go to the hospital to get the medicine. I'll be back soon. Wait for me. Even though she knew that Hu Jiniao couldn't hear her, she still told him. After that, Su Qingsang hurried to the hospital to get the medicine. She was a doctor, so it was naturally very easy for her to do these things. She put Hu Jiniao on the floor as fast as she could and hung the bottle on the bedside table. Hu Jiniao still didn't wake up. His eyebrows were furrowed, and he looked very painful. Su Qingsang got up and was about to go to the kitchen to cook some porridge so that he could eat it when he woke up. Hu Jiniao's phone on the bedside table rang. It was Yang Wenchang. Su Qingsang looked at the number and finally picked it up. President Hua. This is Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang looked at Hu Jiniao, who was sleeping on the bed and didn't notice anything. Jiniao is sick, so he probably can't come to work today. If there's anything, you can deal with it yourself. President Hua is sick. Yes. After Su Qingsang said that, she asked, Assistant Yang, can I ask something? Did something happen to Hu Jiniao in the company these days? Hu Jiniao's behavior yesterday was too unusual. She didn't believe that ordinary work could make Hu Jiniao like that. This. Yang Wenchang wasn't sure if he could tell Su Qingsang. He looked conflicted. Assistant Yang. Su Qingsang's voice became cold. I'm Hu Jinyao's wife. I don't know how to deal with the company's affairs, and I'm not sure if I can help Hu Jinyao. But I think I'm at least qualified to know why he's like this, right? Mrs. Hua, wait for me. I'll come over now. Okay. I'll wait for you. Su Qingseng hung up the phone and put it aside. Her eyes fell on Hu Jinyao's face. His face was red because of the fever, and his breathing was heavy. She sat on the edge of the bed and held his hand, then put his hand against her face. Hu Jinyao, wake up quickly. Su Qingseng put down his hand and went to cook porridge for Hu Jinyao. Su Qingseng had just cooked the porridge and set the time when Yang Wenchang came. He was carrying some food and medicine in his hands. However, when he saw Hu Jinyao and the drip on his arm, he felt that his actions were unnecessary. I forgot that you're a doctor, Mrs. Hua. Su Qingseng shook her head and took the things in his hands. You're very kind. I thank you on behalf of Hu Jinyao. You're welcome. It's what I should do. As he spoke, he glanced at Hu Jinyao, who was lying on the bed. President Hua, when did you get sick? Last night. Su Qingseng thought of Hu Jinyao's appearance when she came back. After I came back, he was taking a cold shower in his room. It's such a hot day, and with that kind of shower, it would be strange if he didn't get sick. Seriously speaking, Hu Jinyao had always been in good health. The reason why he suddenly got sick like this might be because he had something on his mind. What's wrong with him? What happened to Tianyu Group? Su Qingseng looked at Yang Wenchang with a sharp gaze. Yang Wenchang touched his nose. He really didn't know how to answer Su Qingseng's question. Well, Mrs. Hua, do you know why President Hua and his mother, Mrs. Hua, have a bad relationship? I don't know. Su Qingseng was stunned when she heard Yang Wenchang mention Lu Tongjia. She thought of what old Master Hua said the other day. Hu Jinyao is like this because of his mother? Yang Wenchang nodded. Speaking of which, the reason why President Hua is so upset this time is because of Mrs. Hua. Yang Wenchang knew from the day he entered Tianyu Group that Hu Jinyao and Lu Tongjia didn't have a good relationship. However, he didn't expect that their relationship was so bad that Lu Tongjia hated Hu Jinyao so much. Not only did she collude with outsiders, but she also wanted Hu Jinyao to cause great losses to the company. She also wanted him to lose his position as president. She wanted to replace the head of Tianyu Group. Yang Wenchang couldn't say much about other things, but this time, he told Su Qingseng about Xiao Hong's theft of the documents. You mean, Hu Jinyao's mother colluded with outsiders and stole the company's confidential documents? She didn't really want Tianyu Group to suffer losses. She just wanted to pull Hu Jinyao down from his position as president. Is she crazy? Why would she do that? Su Qingseng's face was full of shock. She couldn't understand Lu Tongjia's thoughts at all. I don't know. Yang Wenchang shook his head. President Hu never said anything. Su Qingseng turned her head. Her eyes fell on Hu Jinyao's face, which was abnormally red because of the fever. She bit her lip tightly. That's all for now. Thank you for coming to see him. I'll take care of him from now on. You're welcome. It's what I should do. Yang Wenchang waved his hand. Mrs. Hua, if there's anything you need help with, just let me know. The company is not far from here. I can come over in a minute. Okay. Su Qingseng nodded and didn't refuse. After seeing Yang Wenchang off, Auntie Yu came over. Knowing that Hu Jinyao had a cold, she did the housework quietly. Su Qingseng had no appetite, so she ate something and went back to her room. Hu Jinyao was still sleeping. There was no sign of him waking up. She stared at his face and felt a faint pain in her heart. She really understood him and his pain. It was just like when she thought she was an illegitimate daughter, and when she found out that Su Chenghui had replaced her. The betrayal from family was the most painful. Hu Jinyao started talking again. Su Qingseng heard it, but she couldn't hear it clearly. The voice was too vague. It took her a long time to stay by Hu Jinyao's side. It wasn't until he started talking again that she thought she heard Hu Jinyao call her mother. Su Qingseng was slightly stunned. Her eyes fell on Hu Jinyao's face. Her heart felt as if it was being pricked by needles again. She had always thought that Hu Jinyao didn't have a good relationship with his mother, but she never thought that Hu Jinyao would call her mother when he was sick. She remembered that Hu Jinyao had been encouraging her when she wanted to acknowledge Li Qinxue. She didn't understand why at the time, but now she did. In Hua Jinyao's heart, his mother must have a special place, right? Chapter 543. The note on it was quite restrained. Mother. Su Qingsang looked at the two words and felt an inexplicable sadness in her heart. The call went through. She heard Lu Tongjia's slightly cold voice on the other end of the line. What's the matter? Su Qingsang closed her eyes. She couldn't think of what kind of mother would treat her son like this. Jinyao is sick. He's calling you. Can you come and see him? There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Su Qingsang thought that she didn't hear clearly, so she repeated herself. Is he dying? Lu Tongjia's voice was very cold. Is he dying of illness? You. If he is dying of illness, then I'll come over. If not, there's no need to. Auntie, you're too much. He's your son. I know. He's my son. But there are many times when I wish he wasn't my son. After saying this, Lu Tongjia hung up the phone. Su Qingsang clutched the phone, and her body trembled again and again. She looked at Hua Jinyao. He was still having a fever. He had been very restrained when he called her mother just now. If she hadn't been guarding him, she probably wouldn't have heard it. What did it mean? It was the deepest desire in his heart. But even so, he still restrained himself. Su Qingsang's chest rose and fell violently. She couldn't help but call Lu Tongjia again. Is there anything else? Hua Jinyao is really sick. Are you sure you don't want to see him? He's calling you. Do you know that he's calling you? He wants you to come and see him. Did you hear him? I heard him. So what? Lu Tongjia snorted coldly. What? Do you really think you're the young mistress of the Hua family? Let me tell you, don't try to hurt yourself in front of me. It's useless. The sound of the phone being hung up was heard again. Su Qingsang felt that she was so angry that her face began to heat up. Her whole body felt as if there was a fire burning. She threw down the phone and couldn't control herself anymore. She stood up, put on a coat, and was about to go out. Before leaving, she called Yang Wenchang and asked him to come over to take care of Hua Jinyao for a while. She also told Ms. Yu, who was preparing to go buy groceries, to come over later. It was still early for dinner anyway. She asked her to keep an eye on Hua Jinyao. After that, she took the car keys and left in a hurry. The fire in Su Qingsang's heart was still burning fiercely, even though she had just entered the room. She couldn't restrain herself. She couldn't imagine what kind of mother would be so cold-blooded. What kind of mother would ask if her son was dead? Was Hua Jinyao not Lu Tongjia's biological son? Is that so? She felt as if she had lost all reason. She just wanted to see Lu Tongjia right now. She wanted to bring her to Hua Jinyao. She just wanted to ask her if she would only be satisfied with Hua Jinyao's death. Would she only be satisfied if Hua Jinyao disappeared from this world? There was no one in the living room when she arrived. When Uncle Chung saw her coming in, he quickly came up to her. Young madam, the old man went out today and hasn't come back yet. I'm not looking for Grandpa. Su Qingsang slowed down. Where's Auntie? In the room upstairs. Uncle Chung was a little surprised. It was an open secret in the Hua family that Su Qingsang didn't get along with Lu Tongjia. However, all the servants tacitly didn't mention it. They didn't expect that the young madam would take the initiative to look for Lu Tongjia today. That was really strange. Okay, thank you. After saying that, Su Qingsang rushed upstairs and barged into Lu Tongjia's room. Lu Tongjia was reading in the room. She didn't seem to be affected by the phone call just now. Seeing Su Qingsang rush in without knocking, she raised her head and looked obviously unhappy. Didn't your parents teach you to knock before entering other people's rooms? What happened to your upbringing? Upbringing? Su Qingsang was so angry that she almost laughed. You want to talk to me about upbringing? Lu Tongjia put the book in her hand aside. Her slightly narrowed eyes showed her dissatisfaction. Why can't I talk to you about upbringing? You really don't deserve to be a disciple of the Hua family at all. What about me? I want to ask you right now. Mrs. Hua, do you have upbringing? Your upbringing is that your son is sick and you want him to die? Mrs. Hua, is this your upbringing? She didn't even call her aunt anymore. The word Mrs. Hua was almost squeezed out from between her teeth. full of dissatisfaction and criticism. Are you questioning me? Lu Tongjia raised her head and glared at her. Her face was quite ugly. Who gave you the right? Get out. Hua Jinyao gave me the right. Su Qingsong's anger didn't grow, because she was raised by the Hua family. Instead, it burned even more fiercely. Justice gave me the right. She walked up and stood directly in front of Lu Tongjia. Her face was full of anger. Anger made Su Qingsong's face abnormally red. Her eyes were also red. She clenched her fists tightly and tried hard not to curse. But it was really difficult. She stared at Lu Tongjia, as if she wanted to pierce her. You said you have upbringing? Mrs. Hua, is your upbringing to abandon your own son? Is your upbringing to gang up with outsiders to bully and hurt your own son? Is your upbringing to be cold and distant to your own son? Mrs. Hua, if this is your upbringing, then I am willing to admit that my upbringing is really not as good as yours. Su Qingsang, watch your tone. Who allowed you to talk to me like this? Lu Tongjia stared at Su Qingsang with a face full of accusation. How did I talk to you? Then how did you talk to me? How did you talk to Hua Jinyao? Su Qingsang wanted to curse when she thought of Lu Tongjia's indifference just now. She wanted to question Lu Tongjia as soon as she thought of what she had done. Mrs. Hua, I really don't understand. Hua Jinyao is your son after all. Why do you have to treat him like this? Su Qingsang was really angry. Really angry. Even though she thought that Xiang Kaiping was her mother and abandoned her. She could also understand Xiang Kaiping's difficulties. She understood that it wasn't easy for her. So she didn't hate Xiang Kaiping. Later, she recognized Li Qianxue. She knew that Li Qianxue didn't mean to ignore her. She also didn't hate Li Qianxue. Li Qianxue knew that Su Peijian wasn't her daughter, but she still didn't hate Su Peijian. She even felt like Su Peijian was her daughter. Not only was she not jealous, but she also felt that it was normal. If you raised her for more than 20 years without any feelings, wouldn't that be the biggest tragedy in life? But what about Hua Jinyao? He was Lu Tongjia's biological son, but Lu Tongjia treated him like this? Even if Lu Tongjia didn't mention the 30-year mother-son relationship, she was Hua Jinyao's mother. She was the one who gave birth to Hua Jinyao and brought him into the world. She really couldn't figure it out, and she didn't understand it. Why could Lu Tongjia be so cruel to Hua Jinyao? At first, she didn't like him. She was always critical of Hua Jinyao. But now, she hurt Hua Jinyao and colluded with outsiders to ruin Hua Jinyao's reputation. She could even be indifferent to Hua Jinyao's illness. Why? Mrs. Hua, I know I shouldn't ask these things, but Hua Jinyao is your son. Why are you treating him like this? She thought of Hua Jinyao's current state, the sadness on his face, and the pain she had seen Hua Jinyao in nightmares in the middle of the night. Her heart ached as if it was being pulled by someone. She had never been a mother, but she was an obstetrician and gynecologist. She had seen too many mothers. So many women, so many people wanted to be mothers, but they didn't have the chance. Why could Lu Tongjia be so cold-blooded and heartless when she was a mother? Especially when that person, the person who was neglected and hurt by her mother, was Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang felt that that kind of hurt was even more painful than hurting herself. Are you saying that Hua Jinyao isn't your biological son? So why are you treating him like this? Really? Other than the fact that Hua Jinyao wasn't her biological son, or that he was an illegitimate child like her, a mistress, she really couldn't think of any other reason. When she said that, Su Qingsong's voice was several degrees higher than usual. Her tone was completely interrogative. Her voice was full of anger, confusion, and accusation toward Lu Tongjia. Even though Lu Tongjia was older than her, at that moment, Su Qingsang felt that she had the right to criticize her. Nothing that Lu Tongjia did was like what a mother would do to her child. She had thought that Lu Tongjia would at least have a little compassion for her. But she was wrong. She underestimated the hatred in Lu Tongjia's heart. Lu Tongjia's attitude was much more intense than she had expected. Biological son? Does he deserve it? What Lu Tongjia hated the most in her life was that Hua Jinyao was her biological son. Do you know that I really wish that I never had this son? He doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve it. Lu Tongjia's voice was full of resentment. She glared at Su Qingsang. and her eyes were full of resentment that Su Qingsang couldn't understand. He doesn't deserve to be my son. I don't have a son like that. Su Qingsang stood there and looked at Lu Tongjia. Her whole body went limp, and her face was full of deep hatred and hatred. She was shocked. She couldn't imagine what kind of mother could show such an expression to her own son. She wanted to ask and no. She didn't rush to ask. She just looked at Lu Tongjia with a complicated look in her eyes. I don't have a son like that. Lu Tongjia took a step back and leaned against the wall, almost powerlessly. It had been more than 10 years. The pain had been haunting her day and night. She couldn't forget it, and she couldn't forget it. But what about Hu Jingyao? In the past 10 years, he had done what he had to do. He went to school, skipped grades, completed his studies, studied abroad, returned home to take over the company. He became the president of Tianyu Group and got married. He had lived too well. The calmer he was, the better his life was, the more Lu Tongjia hated him. Chapter 544. He is not worthy. He doesn't deserve it, Lu Tongjia murmured softly. Her voice was low and hoarse, but it was filled with pain. That was no longer a simple grudge. That kind of hatred frightened Su Qingsang, and the anger on her face dissipated a lot. Lu Tongjia's seat was close to the balcony. She stood up and stood next to the wall. At this moment, she turned her face away in discomfort and pressed on the position of her heart. Mrs. Hua? Lu Tongjia was obviously not in a good state. Su Qingsang took 2 steps forward. He stretched out his hand to help her. Go away. Lu Tongjia didn't accept her kindness. She looked at Su Qingsang with resentment in her eyes. I don't need you to pretend to be a good person here. You and Hu Jingyao are the same. You're all the same. Su Qingsang stood there without moving. She just didn't understand. Thinking of Hu Jingyao, who was still lying unconscious on the bed, she looked at Lu Tongjia again. Mrs. Hua, please mind your words. Hu Jingyao is your son. What? Do you think my words are unpleasant? I'm not wrong. Lu Tongjia sneered. Her expression was one of mockery and hatred. It was genuine hatred. That kind of gaze was frightening. Son. I would rather not have such a son. She patted her heart, unable to hide the pain on her face. Have you always wanted to know why I dislike him so much? Lu Tongjia straightened her back and stared at Su Qingsang. Her voice was cold. Do you think it's strange that I hate him? You don't understand, do you? Why is it that even though he is my son, I would rather not have him? Furthermore, do you think that I'm being unreasonable and not behaving like a mother? Su Qingsang didn't respond to Lu Tongjia's questions. She was curious, very curious. However, no matter how much she wanted to know, she wouldn't ask Lu Tongjia or Hu Jingyao. That must not be a good thing. She thought about everything that had happened to Hu Jingyao during this period of time. Those things should not have happened to him. She had also thought that if Hu Jingyao didn't tell her about those nightmares, she wouldn't ask about them. One day, when he was willing to talk, she would ask him again. It didn't matter even if he didn't want to say it. Who didn't have a past? Who didn't have some injuries that they couldn't face? She used to have it too. She was lucky that she got out of it. Because she met Hu Jingyao, the darkness in her heart was turned over. But Hu Jingyao didn't have nightmares in the middle of the night. He was still suffering. Looking at Lu Tongjia now, she really wanted to know. She didn't want to see Hu Jingyao suffer like he did now. She watched as he lost his usual high-spirited demeanor. She watched as he felt pain, because of the hurt from his family. Her heart ached. Why? Her voice was very soft, as if she was afraid to disturb Lu Tongjia's desire to talk. Lu Tongjia stood up straight and moved away from the wall. Step by step, she walked to the sofa in the room and sat down again. Her gaze was fixed on an unknown point in the void. The hatred in her eyes was very obvious, but there was also a bit of blankness and emptiness that she herself did not notice. Because I hate him. You don't know how much I hate him. Lu Tongjia's eyes were red when she said this. There were tears in her eyes, and the emotions in her eyes were tumbling. He killed my son, he killed my daughter. He was so vicious when he was so young. At that time, I really thought that I would rather not have this son. Su Qingsang's eyes widened. For a moment, she thought that there was something wrong with her ears. What did you say? Huh? Lu Tongjia looked at her with a bit of disdain in her eyes. Su Qingsang, haven't you thought about it? The Hua family is such a big family. Other than me and Hua Jinyao's father, Su Qingsang blinked, as if she just remembered it at that moment. Hua Mingliang had 2 sons and a daughter, and Hua Mingmei had a son and a daughter. She had heard from Hua Jinyao that his granduncle, Hua Yangyuan, had 2 sons. She had heard from Hua Jinyao that his granduncle, Hua Yangyuan, had 2 sons. The elder son had a son and a daughter, and the younger son had 2 sons. His grandaunt Hua Yangxiu had 3 sons. Almost all of the previous sons had 2 sons. It seemed that Hua Mingguang and Lu Tongjia were the only ones in the entire Hua family who had only 1 child. A big family like the Hua family, especially a family that thought that having many children was a blessing, didn't seem to be normal. Su Qingsang's heart was suddenly in her throat. She looked at Lu Tongjia, her mind full of doubts. In addition to the doubts, she inexplicably had a bad feeling. She suddenly didn't dare to face what Lu Tongjia was going to say next. It wasn't that she didn't believe Hua Jinyao, but she knew that it must be a very painful past. Lu Tongjia seemed to see the fear on Su Qingsang's face. She sneered, and the hatred in her eyes didn't diminish at all. Instead, because of the bad things that had happened, her face was quite ugly. She closed her eyes. Her eyes were a little red. It wasn't a good thing for her to be too emotional. She raised her hand to cover her heart. She gently breathed to calm herself down. Su Qingsang didn't rush her, nor did she rush her. She was waiting for Lu Tongjia to calm down. It was impossible for Lu Tongjia to calm down. It had been more than 10 years, and she still hadn't calmed down. She looked somewhere, and her expression was a bit nostalgic. I had 3 children. Before Hua Jinyao, he had an older brother named Hua Jinkai. After him, he had a younger sister named Hua Wushuang. When Lu Tongjia said the name Hua Wushuang, tears fell from the corners of her eyes. Her daughter, the daughter she had wanted for so long. Until now, the pain of losing her son and daughter had been tormenting her day and night at all times. The more she felt sad, the more she hated Hua Jinyao, and the more she couldn't forgive him. But they were all killed by Hua Jinyao. That's impossible. Su Qingsang's voice was very soft, almost whispering. She had been married to Hua Jinyao for almost a year. She knew what kind of person Hua Jinyao was. She believed that Hua Jinyao would never hurt his brothers and sisters. Impossible? Lu Tongjia sneered, and the hatred in her eyes became more and more obvious. She also hoped that it was impossible. She also hoped that Hua Jinyao didn't say and do those things at that time. But in fact, Lu Tongjia could be said to have lived a very happy life. Her starting point was much higher than the average person's. The Lu family was considered a respectable family in Rong City. Although it wasn't as rich as the Hua family, or even the Li family, it was still the only daughter of the Lu family. But as the only daughter of the Lu family, she was also spoiled since she was a child. Her father, mother, and brother all doted on her and followed her lead. When she grew up and went to college, she met Hua Mingguang by chance. Hua Mingguang was the eldest son of the Hua family. He took over the family business at an early age, and his every move was like a successful man. Lu Tongjia fell in love with Hua Mingguang at first sight. Luckily, Hua Mingguang liked her too. For Lu Tongjia, this was the best piece of news she could have ever heard. The 2 of them decided to get married not long after they started dating. Old Master Hua was not picky about family background. Not to mention that Lu Tongjia's family background was not bad. They were a good match, and the 2 of them had feelings for each other. Moreover, the Hua family was strict. Old Master Hua was very loyal to his wife, and used this to restrain his children. Even though Lu Tongjia was only a college student at that time, she felt quite happy. Before she graduated, Lu Tongjia married Hua Mingguang. Not long after she graduated, she gave birth to her eldest son, Hua Jinkai. She firmly sat on the position of the young madam of the Hua family. Less than 2 years after she gave birth to Hua Jinkai, she gave birth to Hua Jinyao. At that time, she and Hua Mingguang were very close. But after giving birth to 2 sons, she was a little unsatisfied. She liked daughters, and so did Hua Mingguang. She wanted to have another daughter, but for several years, she didn't get her wish. When Hua Jinyao was 8 years old, She finally got pregnant again. Lu Tongjia prayed to her grandparents, prayed to God, and prayed to Buddha. She only hoped that the child in her belly was a daughter. After all, she had 2 sons, and she really wanted a daughter. She also felt that she was really lucky. Whatever she asked for came. She wanted a daughter, and a daughter came. That year, Lu Tongjia gave birth to 3 children. 11-year-old Hu Jinkai, 9-year-old Hu Jinyao, and a newborn daughter. She had a son and a daughter, and a husband who loved her deeply. Her father-in-law and mother-in-law were both kind. They never said anything about making things difficult for the younger generation. Lu Tongjia really felt that she was the happiest person in the world. Especially Hu Wushuang. She wasn't as naughty as Hu Jinkai and Hu Jinyao when they were young. Hu Wushuang perfectly combined the advantages of her parents' appearance. She was cute and cute. She liked to call her mother and brother in a childish voice. She was both obedient and sensible. Lu Tongjia really felt that her life was perfect. But who knew? Accidents always came so quickly. Sometimes, she wondered if God saw that the first half of her life was too good and too smooth, so he wanted her to suffer some hardships. That kind of suffering was almost fatal to her. When Hu Jinyao was 12 years old Master Hu's wife suddenly passed away. Her death was so sudden that no one expected it. After all, the old lady seemed to be such a healthy person. Like old Master Hu, the old lady was kind and benevolent. As soon as she passed away, all her children and grandchildren were sad. Plus, the Hu family's status in Rong City. Many people came to pay their respects. Some of them were business people, some were relatives and friends of the Hu family, and some had benefited from the Hu family in the past. They wanted to burn incense for the old lady. Hu Jinkai and Hu Jinyao were fine. They were both teenagers and had grown up. Naturally, they could keep watch. But Hu Wushuang was different. She was less than 4 years old. How could she stand watching for the whole day? She stayed in the morning hall. Besides, there were so many people, and they could only hear the sad sounds every day. It was inevitable that she was scared, so she cried every day. Later, her voice became hoarse from crying. Lu Tongjia felt sorry for her daughter, and old Master Hu also felt sorry for his granddaughter. At that time, Hu Manzi was already born, but Hu Wushuang was very cute and sweet. She had lived with old Master Hu since she was a child, so their relationship was naturally special. Old Master Hu loved his granddaughter, so he asked her not to keep watch every day. Every time a guest came to pay their respects, he asked the nanny to carry Hu Wushuang out. Hu Jinkai and Hu Jinyao couldn't avoid it. After 7 days of watching, the 2 brothers lost a lot of weight. When the old lady's funeral was over, Hu Wushuang, who couldn't go out and was always locked up at home, was bored. She was still too young to understand what death meant. She only felt that, like her mother said, her grandmother had gone to another world. That world was called heaven, and heaven was beautiful. When the funeral was over, Hu Wushuang couldn't sit still anymore. She begged Hu Jinkai and Hu Jinyao to take her out to play. Both of them loved their little sister very much. They also thought that Hu Wushuang had been locked up at home during this period of time. The 2 brothers didn't think too much about it. Plus, they always took Hu Wushuang out to play. Their family didn't worry about it. At that time, Hu Jinkai was already 14 years old. He was more than 1.7 meters tall, and didn't look like a child. Hu Jinyao was the same. Although he was only 12 years old, he was already 1.6 meters tall. The 2 brothers took Hu Wushuang out together. Hu Wushuang was only a little over 4 years old. Her favorite thing was to go to the amusement park and play on the merry-go-round. Naturally, the 2 brothers agreed to their little sister's request. The 3 siblings went to the amusement park together. The 2 brothers accompanied Hu Wushuang to play on the merry-go-round 3 times. When they were about to leave, Hu Wushuang saw the pictures on the haunted house. Although she was small, she was very brave. No matter how Hu Jinyao tried to persuade her, she decided to go to the haunted house. Hu Jinkai and Hu Jinyao were both grown up, so they weren't afraid. Therefore, the 2 of them held Hu Wushuang's hand and walked into the haunted house together. However, as soon as they entered the haunted house, an accident happened. Hu Jinkai and his sister always went out with the chauffeur. Hua Wushuang liked to be comfortable, so every time she went out, she would take the RV. There was a refrigerator in the car, and there were all kinds of snacks and drinks for her. It was also convenient for her to lie down in the car and rest when she was tired. The Hua family had a high status and reputation in Rong City, coupled with their relationship with Hu Yangyuan and Hu Yangxiu. Ordinary people didn't dare to mess with them. However, that day, Hua Jinkai and his sister were unlucky. A fugitive happened to escape to Rong City. This man had just committed robbery and murder in a neighboring city. The leader of the gang was called Da, who was a national A-level wanted criminal. He was a national wanted criminal, so he naturally wanted to run away as soon as possible. However, before he ran away, he wanted to do one more job and make some money before leaving. Before he came, he had already gathered a few people who were not afraid of death like him. They all had criminal records. The four of them decided to do something big together. When the time came, they would escape to the ends of the earth. At that time, they had already been in Rong City for a few days, and they were living a life of hiding. They hadn't thought about what they were going to do. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.